The notification hit my neural implant at exactly 2:47 a.m. Venus station time. I groaned, rolled over in my cramped maintenance pod, and tried to ignore the persistent pinging in my skull. But Jax, being the absolute menace he was, had overridden my do not disturb settings again. Rise and shine, sunshine. His voice echoed directly into my brain. You lost the bet. Remember, time to pay up. I sat up, nearly hitting my head on the low ceiling. Outside my viewport, the swirling clouds of Venus created an eternal twilight, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the massive floating city of Venus Station Alpha. Home to 63 different species and one very tired human systems engineer. What bet, I mumbled, though I knew exactly what he meant. The Zephyrian mating dance contest. You said humans could totally pull off their 17-joint flexibility moves. You were wrong. Spectacularly wrong. Now you owe me. Right. That, in my defense, I'd consumed way too much synthesized alcohol at the interspecies cultural exchange last week. The memory of my attempted dance still made me cringe. The Zephyrians had been polite about it, but I'm pretty sure I'd invented new ways to embarrass humanity. Fine, I groaned, pulling on my work coveralls. What fresh hell do you have planned for me? Jax's grin was audible, even through the neural link. Oh, it's beautiful. You're going to create a profile on Cosmic Hearts. I froze. The alien dating app? Absolutely not. Absolutely yes. And here's the best part. You have to make yourself sound super impressive. Like, diplomat-level impressive. I want to see how many matches you can get before someone figures out you're just a glorified space plumber. I'm a systems integration specialist, I protested weakly, who spent last Tuesday unclogging the waste recycling unit in Sector 7. Face it, Riven, you're perfect for this. It'll be hilarious. I wanted to argue, but Jax had that tone that meant he'd already started spreading the word about our bet. By morning shift, half the human contingent on the station would know if I backed out. Pride was a hell of a drug. 1 week. I negotiated. I create the profile, see what happens for 1 week, then I delete it. Deal O, and Riven, make it interesting. Go big or go home. As Jax's presence faded from my neural link, I stared at the Cosmic Hearts icon floating in my visual display. The app had been created after the Great Peace Accords, supposedly to foster better interspecies relations. In reality, it was mostly used by bored diplomats and xenophiles looking for exotic hookups. I activated the app and started filling out the profile. Name Riven Chase, species human. Age 32. Earth years. I had to use the conversion calculator for other planetary systems. Occupation. I hesitated. Systems integration specialist sounded boring. Jax wanted impressive fine. Occupation special envoy for human galactic relations. I snorted. It wasn't technically a lie. Last month, I had to explain to a confused crystalline entity why humans needed bathrooms. That counted as relations, right? The app prompted me for more details. Height 1.8 meters, tragically average for humans. Practically microscopic compared to most species. Unique abilities, pattern recognition, improvisational problem solving, and an unfortunate tendency to find humor in life-threatening situations. For the profile description, I went all out. Passionate about building bridges between worlds, both literally and metaphorically. Recently negotiated a critical treaty regarding waste management protocols. Okay, that was pushing it. Seeking someone who appreciates humanity's unique perspective on the universe. Fun fact, humans are the only species that can metabolize both chocolate and capsaicin, which makes us excellent dinner companions. I uploaded a photo from last year's Unity Day celebration, the one where I actually looked presentable in formal wear, instead of my usual grease-stained coveralls. The auto-translator would handle the rest, converting my profile into thousands of alien languages. With a mixture of amusement and dread, I hit submit. Then I went to work and forgot about it. The Sector 12 cooling systems needed realignment. A job that required crawling through maintenance tubes designed by sadistic Arthosians who apparently had no concept of human skeletal limitations. By the time I emerged, covered in coolant and sporting several new bruises, my shift was nearly over. It wasn't until I was back in my pod, heating up a ration pack that claimed to be Earth-style pasta, but tasted more like cardboard with delusions of grandeur, that I remembered the dating app. Holy shit! I had 847 notifications. Most were automated matches from beings I couldn't even pronounce the species names of. A few were messages in languages the translator struggled with, producing gems like, "Your carbon-based form intrigues my spawning protocols," and "Greetings, Flesh Haver. Your bilateral symmetry is adequate." I was scrolling through the messages, increasingly amused by the creative interpretations of flirting across species, when one made me stop cold. From Seraphe Valtir species, Olvalan vampire class, title 3rd heir, to the Crimson Throne. Why did you lie about being a diplomat? My blood turned to ice. The Olvalan were no joke. They were one of the oldest spacefaring species, predating even the Galactic Council, vampiric in nature. They fed on the bioenergy of other beings, though the peace accords had strictly regulated such feeding to voluntary donors. They were also notoriously traditional, obsessed with hierarchy, and had a thing about honesty. As in, they could literally smell lies, and they really didn't like liars. Usually, they just unmatched and moved on. Sometimes, if the lie was egregious enough, they'd report it to station security. But messaging to ask about it, that was unusual. I checked her profile. The image that loaded made me forget how to breathe for a second. The Olvalan were humanoid in basic shape, but that's where the similarities ended. Seraphi had skin like polished obsidian, with veins of bioluminescent silver, creating intricate patterns across her visible flesh. Her eyes were solid crimson, no pupils or whites, just an endless depth of red that seemed to pull you in. Her hair, if you could call the flowing tendrils of shadow that, moved independently, defying the station's artificial gravity. But it was her expression that caught me. While most Olvalan profile photos showed them in formal, rigid poses befitting their status, Seraphi was smirking. It was subtle, just a slight upturn of lips that revealed the barest hint of fang, but it transformed her face from coldly beautiful to dangerously intriguing. Her bio was short. Traditionalism is just peer pressure from dead people, seeking interesting conversations and someone who can make me laugh. Bonus points if you can explain why humans put pineapple on pizza. Before I could talk myself out of it, I messaged back, because we're agents of chaos who refuse to let the universe make sense. Also, technically, I never said I was a diplomat. I said I was a special envoy for human-galactic relations, which is true. I am human. I do have relations with galactic citizens, and I'm definitely special. My performance evaluation last month used words like unique and unprecedented. Her response came quickly. Clever, stupid, but clever. Meet me at the Umbral Lounge tomorrow night. Midnight, station time. Come alone, and bring your best lie. I enjoy collecting them. The Umbral Lounge. I knew of it by reputation only, a Olvalan establishment in the deepest levels of the station where the artificial lights were kept deliberately low. It catered to beings who preferred shadow to sunshine, silence to small talk. It was also, according to station gossip, where the Olvalan nobility held their informal courts. What the hell was I getting myself into? I spent the next day alternating between panic and preparation. During my lunch break, I cornered Yuki, the only other human on the station who'd actually dated outside our species with any success. The Umbral Lounge. She whistled low. Riven, that's not just a bar. That's like Imagine if vampires had vampire bars that even other vampires thought were too vampire-y. That's the Umbral Lounge. Very helpful, thanks. She leaned in conspiratorially. Look, I dated a Thoraxian once. Different species, but similar age. The ancient races. They don't think like us. To them, everything is a game, and the stakes are always higher than you think. If an Ulvalan noble wants to meet you, she's either incredibly bored or incredibly interested. Either way, you're probably screwed. Again, super helpful. Just be yourself. I guess, but like the interesting version of yourself. The version that doesn't spend weekends binge-watching old Earth shows and eating cereal in his underwear. I feel so attacked right now. By 11:45 p.m., I stood outside the Umbral Lounge, wearing the only formal clothing I owned, a black suit that was probably fashionable on Earth about a century ago. The entrance was marked only by a subtle shift in the corridor's lighting, darkness that seemed to eat photons for breakfast. I stepped through and immediately understood why humans rarely came here. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it was a presence unto itself. It moved like liquid between the patrons, most of whom were Ulvalan, though I spotted a few shadow-dwelling species mixed in. Conversations happened in whispers that somehow carried perfectly to their intended recipients, and no further. The air smelled of iron and ozone, and something floral that made my hindbrain scream warnings. Seraphe was waiting at a corner table that existed in its own pool of deeper darkness. She wore something that looked like liquid starlight, a dress that seemed to be cut from the space between stars. As I approached, she tilted her head, studying me with those endless crimson eyes. "You came," she said. Her voice was like aged whiskey poured over broken glass, smooth and dangerous. "I'm nothing if not punctual," I replied, sitting across from her. "It's the one thing my performance reviews consistently praise." Along with being unique and unprecedented, the smirk from her photo was back. "Tell me, Riven Chase, what does a human systems engineer want with the alien dating scene? Besides lying about his credentials, of course. Honestly, I lost a bet. My friend thought it would be hilarious to see me try to navigate interspecies dating. The diplomat thing was just to make the profile more interesting. I figured I'd get a few matches, delete the app in a week, and we'd all have a good laugh. And yet here you are, in a Ulvalan establishment, meeting with someone who could drain your life force with a touch." She leaned forward slightly. "Either you're braver than you appear, or stupider. I haven't decided which." "Por qué no los dos?" I said, then caught her confused expression. "Sorry, old Earth language. It means why not both? I find the line between bravery and stupidity is usually just a matter of perspective." She actually laughed. It was a sound like crystal chimes in a minor key. "You really aren't a diplomat, are you? They're never this honest about their own limitations." "God, no. I mean, I did help mediate a dispute between the janitorial staff last month about whose turn it was to clean the methane breathers' quarters. But that's about the extent of my diplomatic experience. And yet your profile claims you negotiated critical treaties about waste management protocols, which is technically true. Do you have any idea how complex the sewage system is on a station with 63 different species? The Aquarians need their waste filtered and recycled as nutrients. The pyrophytes literally shit combustible material. And don't get me started on what the Hive Collective produces. I've saved this station from some truly catastrophic bathroom disasters." She stared at me for a long moment, then laughed again, louder this time. Several nearby Ulvalan turned to stare, their expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval. "You're serious," she said. "You're actually serious. You consider sewage management a form of diplomacy. Everything's diplomacy if you squint hard enough. Besides, you'd be amazed how many conflicts start over basic infrastructure. Last cycle, We nearly had an interspecies incident because someone cross-connected the Zephyrian meditation pools with the Thoraxian molting chambers. Have you ever seen a Zephyrian in a rage state? They turn this alarming shade of puce and start secreting pheromones that smell like burnt rubber and disappointment. "Stop," she said, but she was still smiling. "You're going to make me snort, and that's terribly undignified for someone of my status. Your status as third heir to the Crimson Throne." I asked, which, by the way, sounds like something out of a Gothic novel. "Do you also brood in towers and write poetry about the futility of existence?" "Only on weekends," she deadpanned. "During the week, I'm far too busy disappointing my grandmother by suggesting radical ideas like maybe we shouldn't treat other species as walking food sources, and perhaps a society based entirely on blood purity is slightly outdated." The humor faded from her voice on those last words, replaced by something harder, more bitter. I recognized the tone. I'd heard it in my own voice when talking about Earth's less stellar history. "Let me guess," I said. "They love that kind of progressive thinking." "Oh, absolutely. Last family gathering, I suggested we should consider opening diplomatic channels with the synthetic collective. You'd have thought I'd suggested we all start subsisting on plant matter. Uncle Vorthak nearly had an aneurysm, which, for an immortal being, is quite an achievement." "The synths are good people," I said. "Well, not people, obviously. Good. Entities I work with, one in maintenance. Best diagnostic technician I've ever seen. Never complains about overtime either." "Careful," she warned, but her tone was playful. "That kind of radical acceptance might get you barred from all the best Ulvalan establishments." "Oh no. Where else would I go to sit in pitch darkness and have existential conversations with vampire nobility?" "Is that what you think this is, an existential conversation? Isn't it we're discussing the nature of identity, the weight of tradition versus progress, the arbitrary boundaries between species? Pretty existential for a first date?" She went very still. "This is a date." Oh shit. Had I misread the situation? Was this some kind of Ulvalan interrogation technique? Was she about to call security or worse, her grandmother? I mean, we met on a dating app. So I just assumed. But if this is actually some kind of formal inquisition about my fake diplomat credentials, I can definitely switch gears. I brought my tax records if that helps. They're incredibly boring, but very legitimate." She stared at me for a long moment, those crimson eyes unreadable. Then she threw her head back and laughed. Really laughed, not the controlled chuckles from before. The sound filled the darkness around us, rich and genuine, and completely at odds with the somber atmosphere of the lounge. "You beautiful idiot," she said, once she caught her breath. "Do you know how long it's been since someone surprised me? Really surprised me centuries. Riven chase. Literal centuries. And here you are, a human who fixes toilets and thinks that qualifies as diplomacy, sitting in the darkest corner of the station's most exclusive establishment, asking if this is a date with someone who could kill you with a thought. So, is that a yes?" She leaned back in her chair, studying me with renewed interest. "Tell me something, Riven. What do you know about Ulvalan politics?" "Honestly, next to nothing. I know you're ancient, traditionally focused on bloodline purity, and have a complex hierarchical system that makes Earth's old monarchies look positively egalitarian. Also, you really don't like liars, which makes my current situation somewhat precarious." "All true. What you might not know is that we're in the middle of what humans might call a generational crisis. The old guard, like my grandmother, and the Crimson Circle she leads, believe in maintaining our traditional ways. Isolation, supremacy. The old feeding practices barely constrained by the peace accords." Her voice dropped lower. Then there are those like me who think perhaps a species that hasn't evolved socially in 3 millennia might benefit from some fresh perspectives. And that's where fake diplomats who are actually plumbers come in. Systems integration specialists, she corrected with a smirk. And no. That's where I usually get lectured about duty and bloodline and the natural order of things. But then I saw your profile. This ridiculous human claiming to be a diplomat, talking about chocolate and capsaicin like they were qualifications for interspecies relations. And I thought, why not? Why not see what happens when you throw a human into the middle of Ulvalan politics? Warning bells were going off in my head. I feel like I should mention that I have zero political experience, unless you count voting in the station's best recreational facility poll. I campaigned pretty hard for the zero-G swimming pool. Did you win? Lost to the holographic entertainment suite? Turns out more species can enjoy visual stimulation than can survive in water. Democracy's a bitch sometimes. She smiled again, and I realized I was already addicted to making that happen. Here's what I propose. Riven Chase. Continue this date. Be my +1 to a family gathering tomorrow night. Let them all see the third heir, consorting with a human who thinks waste management is diplomacy. It'll give grandmother conniptions and might actually spark some interesting conversations. And what's in it for me besides potentially being drained of life force by angry vampire relatives? Besides the honor of my company, she pretended to think, how about the universe's most interesting story to tell, how I accidentally infiltrated vampire high society, would make for quite the conversation starter. I knew I should say no. Every self-preservation instinct I had was screaming that this was a terrible idea. But here's the thing about being human. We're really, really bad at walking away from interesting disasters. When you put it like that, I said, how can I refuse? But I should warn you. I don't know any vampire etiquette. I might use the wrong fork or accidentally compliment someone's grandmother or something equally catastrophic. Oh, Riven, she purred. And the sound did things to my nervous system that definitely weren't covered in any xenobiology textbook. That's exactly what I'm counting on. She raised a hand, and shadows coalesced into something solid. 2 glasses, filled with a liquid that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A toast, she said, to terrible decisions and beautiful disasters. I picked up the glass, hoping it wasn't actual blood or some other bodily fluid I'd rather not think about. What is this? Synthesized plasma with a dash of dark matter, completely safe for human consumption, though it might make your dreams a bit more vivid for the next few cycles. Of course it will, I muttered, but I raised my glass anyway. To terrible decisions and beautiful disasters, and to fake diplomacy, real plumbing, and whatever the hell I've just agreed to. We drank. It tasted like starlight and regret and the color purple. If purple was a flavor that could also judge your life choices, I immediately decided I liked it, which probably said concerning things about my decision-making process. So, I said, setting down the glass, tell me about this family gathering. Scale of 1 to 10. How dead am I going to be by the end of it? Oh, probably only a 6, she said casually. 7 if grandmother's in a mood. But don't worry, I'll protect you. Mostly. It would be terribly embarrassing to lose my fake diplomat on the first real date. This is the first real date. Well, I certainly hope there will be more. You're far too entertaining to drain all at once. And that's how I, Riven Chase, systems integration specialist and professional idiot, ended up dating vampire nobility. Jax was going to lose his mind when he found out, assuming I survived long enough to tell him. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The way other Ulvalan kept glancing at our table with expressions of shock and calculation. The way Seraphi's shadows seemed to dance with barely contained energy whenever she laughed. The fact that she'd chosen me, of all beings, to make a statement to her family. But in that moment, sitting in the darkness with a beautiful, dangerous woman who found my terrible jokes amusing. I couldn't bring myself to care about consequences. Future Riven could deal with those. Present Riven was too busy falling into those crimson eyes and wondering what synthesized plasma actually did to human dreams. Spoiler alert, it made them weird. Really, really weird. But that's a story for another time. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of panic and preparation. I'd agreed to attend a vampire noble family gathering. Me. A guy whose most formal experience was the mandatory station safety briefing, where I'd fallen asleep and drooled on the deputy administrator's shoulder. During my morning shift, I couldn't focus. I kept cross-connecting the wrong systems, nearly routing the methane breather's atmosphere into the human quarter. My supervisor, a four-armed regalian named Supervisor Thex, pulled me aside after the third near catastrophe. "Chase," he said, his primary eyes narrowing while his secondary set remained focused on his tablet. "You're distracted. This is unlike you. Usually, you wait until at least noon before nearly killing everyone." "Sorry, Supervisor, I've got a thing tonight." "A thing?" All four eyes swiveled to me now. "What kind of thing makes a human this scattered? Are you dying? Is it contagious? Should I file workplace contamination forms?" "It's a date," I admitted. He relaxed 3 of his arms. "Ah, romantic distraction. Very inefficient. Who's the lucky being, that human from Sector 9? The one with the synthetic augmentations?" "Actually, she's Ulvalin." The tablet slipped from his grip, saved only by his fourth arm's reflexes. Ulvalin, as in the vampire species that considers most of us talking snacks. Third heir to the Crimson Throne, specifically. Thex's coloration shifted through several shades I'd learned, meant extreme concern, mild panic, and something that didn't translate but seemed to involve questioning my sanity. "Chase, I've always respected your work, even when you do things like reverse the gravity in the breakfast hall. But this, have you updated your will? Do humans have will? Should I start training your replacement?" "I appreciate the vote of confidence. I'm serious. The Ulvalin nobility don't date outside their species. They barely acknowledge other species exist, except as food sources or servants. What possible interest could one have in you?" He paused, then added more gently, "No offense meant. None taken. And honestly, I think she's trying to piss off her family. By dating you. By bringing me to a family gathering and introducing me as a diplomat." Thex's color palette went through another rapid shift, ending in what I recognized as his version of hysterical laughter. His whole body shook, causing his tool belt to jingle like demented wind chimes. "Oh, Chase. Oh, you beautiful fool. You're going to die. You're going to die in such an interesting way that they'll probably name a new workplace safety regulation after you. The Riven Chase Memorial Protocol, don't date species that can drain your life force." "Exactly, I'll make sure it's posted in all common areas. Your sacrifice will educate future generations." I spent my lunch break in the station's cultural database, desperately researching Ulvalin etiquette. The results were not encouraging. Rule 1, never show weakness. The Ulvalin respected strength and saw any vulnerability as an invitation to establish dominance. Rule 2, never lie. They could sense deception through pheromone changes and blood flow variations. Rule 3, never refuse a direct challenge. To do so was to forfeit your status and potentially your life. Rule 4, through approximately 4,000 various complex social hierarchies involving blood purity, age, accomplishments, and something called shadow depth that the translator couldn't adequately explain. I was thoroughly fucked. "You look like someone just told you the heat death of the universe is scheduled for tomorrow." I looked up from my pad to find Yuki sliding into the seat across from me, carrying 2 cups of what passed for coffee on the station. She pushed one toward me. "Ulvalin etiquette," I explained, showing her the screen. "Apparently, If someone of higher status offers you blood, refusing is a mortal insult, but accepting creates a debt that can last centuries. So don't let them offer. How do I stop a vampire from offering blood? Hold up garlic, I don't think that works when they're from another planet. Yuki sipped her coffee thoughtfully. You know what your problem is, Riven. You're trying to play by their rules, but she asked you because you don't know the rules. Be yourself. Be the guy who thinks explaining proper toilet maintenance counts as diplomacy. That guy is going to get drained and mounted on a wall as a cautionary tale. Maybe, but at least you'll be an authentic cautionary tale. She leaned forward. Look, interspecies dating is hard. When I dated Zixtar, I spent weeks trying to understand Thoraxian mating displays. Turns out, I was doing them all wrong anyway, but he liked that I tried. And he loved that I could laugh about it. If this vampire noble wanted someone who knew all the protocols, she'd date another vampire. Or she wants to watch her family eviscerate me for entertainment. Also possible, but hey, at least you'll die interesting. Why did everyone keep saying that like it was a comfort? By evening, I stood in front of my mirror, wearing the formal outfit Seraphe had sent to my quarters. It was Ulvalan formal wear, adapted for human physiology. Flowing black fabric that seemed to move independently, with silver tracery that matched the patterns I'd seen on Seraphi's skin. It fit perfectly, which was somehow more unsettling than if it hadn't. A message popped up on my neural implant. Transport arriving in 5 minutes. Don't eat anything beforehand. Trust me. You saw. Great. Vampire dinner parties apparently came with dietary warnings. The transport that arrived wasn't the standard automated pod I expected. It was a sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to be made of solidified shadow. The interior was all curves and darkness, lit only by the same bioluminescent veins I'd seen on the Ulvalan themselves. Destination House, Valtir Compound. A voice whispered directly into my mind. Estimated arrival 17 minutes. Please remain seated during transit through shadow space. Shadow space, of course, because regular space wasn't terrifying enough. The journey felt like being gently dissolved and reconstituted several times. Colors that didn't exist flashed past the windows. At one point, I was pretty sure we traveled through the inside of a sound. When we finally stopped, my atoms felt like they'd been rearranged by someone working from a rough sketch of human anatomy. The Valtir compound was, well, imagine if Gothic architecture had a baby with non-Euclidean geometry. And that baby was raised by creatures that thought physics was more of a suggestion than a law. Spires twisted into shapes that hurt to look at directly. Shadows moved independently of their sources. The whole structure seemed to exist in more dimensions than the standard 3, with parts of it fading in and out of visibility, like a cosmic slideshow. Seraphi waited at the entrance, and I forgot how to breathe again. She wore something that made her previous outfit look casual, a gown of living darkness, decorated with what appeared to be actual stars. Not representations of stars. Actual stars. Her shadow hair was elaborately styled into a crown that defied gravity and possibly causality. "You came," she said, sounding genuinely pleased and slightly surprised. "Did you think I wouldn't?" I gave it even odds. Humans have surprisingly strong self-preservation instincts for such a short-lived species. "Yeah, well, I've never been accused of being a typical human." I gestured at the compound. "So this is home. It's very architecturally ambitious." She smiled. That dangerous curve of lips that made my heart do complicated things. "Wait until you see the inside. We had to tone down the exterior after the neighbors complained about reality distortions." "Your neighbors complain about reality distortions?" "The crystallids next door are very particular about maintaining linear time in their vicinity. Something about it interfering with their harmonic resonance. We've been feuding for 6 centuries. She offered her arm. An oddly human gesture that I suspected was for my benefit. Her skin was cool to the touch, Not cold like death, but like shade on a hot day. We walked through doors that opened before we reached them, into a foyer that definitely contained more space than should have fit in the structure I'd seen outside. "Quick primer before we go in," she said, her voice dropping to businesslike tones. "My grandmother is matriarch Zaranth Valtir. She's roughly 4,000 years old and believes other species exist primarily as emergency food supplies. Do not, under any circumstances, look her directly in the eyes. She'll take it as either a challenge or an invitation to dig through your memories." Noted. No eye contact with the ancient vampire matriarch. "My Uncle Vorthak will probably try to provoke you. He has issues with my progressive ideas and will see you as an embodiment of everything wrong with modern society. Don't rise to the bait. He once killed someone for using the wrong honorific, and that was at a peace summit." Right. Let the racist uncle insult me. Check. There will be others, cousins, distant relatives, political allies. Most will ignore you, which is honestly the best-case scenario. A few might be curious. One or two might even be sympathetic, though they won't show it openly. She paused at another set of doors, these ones carved from what looked like frozen screams. "Ready?" "Absolutely not." "Perfect. Remember, you're a diplomat. Act like you belong here." The doors opened onto a scene from a beautiful nightmare. The gathering hall was a cavern of impossible angles, lit by floating orbs of blood-red light. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that didn't match any heartbeat I knew. At least 30 Ulvalan in various states of formal dress mingled in small groups, their shadows dancing independently across the floor. Every conversation stopped when we entered. I felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, pressing against my skin. Some gazed with curiosity, others with barely disguised hunger, and a few with what could only be described as anticipatory amusement. "Seraphi!" The voice came from a throne-like chair at the far end of the hall, and every instinct I had screamed danger. Matriarch Zaranth Valtir was ancient in a way that transcended physical appearance. She looked young, maybe mid-30s in human terms, but her presence felt like the weight of collapsed stars. "You brought a pet." "I brought a guest, grandmother," Seraphi replied, her tone carefully neutral. "May I present Special Envoy Riven Chase of the Human Diplomatic Corps." I managed a bow that probably looked ridiculous, but seemed safer than attempting any of the complex Ulvalan gestures I'd seen in the database. "Matriarch, thank you for permitting my presence in your home." She laughed, a sound like crystal shattering in a vacuum. "Oh, it speaks, and with such careful words. Tell me, little human, what kind of envoy are you, trade cultural? Or perhaps—" Her smile revealed fangs that seemed to go on forever. "Sacrificial. Primarily, technical integration with a focus on interspecies infrastructure coordination," I said, falling back on bureaucratic nonsense. "Though I do have some experience in cultural exchange, as evidenced by my presence here." "Infrastructure," Uncle Vorthak spat from his position near the throne. He was massive, even for an Ulvalan, built like a predator that had never needed to evolve past apex status. Humans and their obsession with building things, as if the universe cares about your little constructs. "With respect," I said, trying to remember if that was the right honorific. "Infrastructure is what allows gatherings like this to occur. The atmospheric processors that let multiple species exist in the same space. The gravitational adjustments that prevent some of us from floating away or being crushed. The universal translators that let us communicate. All infrastructure. It speaks of necessities as if they were accomplishments," another vampire commented. This one was younger looking, with silver patterns that marked her as some kind of artist or scholar. "How typically human." Seraphi's hand tightened slightly on my arm. "Riven has been instrumental in maintaining Venus Station's multi-species functionality. Just last week, He prevented a catastrophic failure in the waste management systems. I finished, because apparently I had a death wish. Specifically, the interaction between pyrophyte combustible waste and the methane-based byproducts of the gaseous collective. The resulting explosion would have taken out 3 sectors and probably started an interspecies incident. The room went quiet in a different way. Less predators watching prey, and more, did the food just claim to be important? You're telling us, Vortex said slowly, that you prevented a war by managing sewage. I prefer to think of it as creative diplomatic intervention through applied engineering. After all, it's hard to maintain peace treaties when half the embassy district is on fire. Someone laughed. Actually laughed. I looked toward the sound and saw a younger Ulvalan, probably only a few centuries old, with patterns that marked him as military. He has a point, the young vampire said. How many wars have started over resource disputes? Water, air, living space? If someone ensures those resources flow properly, then they prevent conflicts before they start. Seraphi finished, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Exactly my point. Humans might not have our strength or longevity, but they have a talent for finding elegant solutions to complex problems. Elegant, Vorthax scoffed. They're barely evolved past throwing rocks at each other. Actually, I said, because apparently my survival instincts had completely shut down. We're quite good at throwing rocks. We've refined it into an art form, kinetic weapons, ballistic trajectories, even figured out how to throw rocks so hard they split atoms. Say what you will about human evolution, but we're probably the best rock throwers in the galaxy. The military vampire definitely laughed this time. A few others made sounds that might have been amusement or hunger. It was hard to tell with the fangs. You have a strange champion, granddaughter, the matriarch observed. One who speaks of sewage and stones as if they were poetry. What game are you playing? No game, grandmother. Simply introducing the family to someone who represents humanity's actual contributions to the galaxy, rather than the political puppets we usually encounter. And you expect us to believe this person is a legitimate diplomat. This was it. The moment where the lie would collapse, and I'd find out what Ulvalan did to people who infiltrated their gatherings under false pretenses. I opened my mouth, not sure if I was going to confess or double down on the deception. Of course he's not a traditional diplomat, Seraphi said before I could speak. Look at him. Do you see any of the usual markers? The genetic modifications for enhanced memory, the neural implants for real-time language processing, the bioregulators to control involuntary responses. She was right. Real diplomats were extensively modified to handle the challenges of interspecies negotiation. I was just a guy in a fancy suit trying not to hyperventilate. He's something better, she continued. A human who solves real problems that affect real beings. Not someone who spends decades debating treaty subsections, but someone who ensures the stations keep running, the air keeps flowing, and yes, the waste keeps processing. He's authentic. Authentic, the matriarch repeated, tasting the word. How refreshingly naive. Tell me, authentic human, what do you know of our people? Time to see if my frantic research had stuck. I know you're one of the oldest spacefaring species, predating the Galactic Council by millennia. Your society values strength, tradition, and bloodline purity. You're apex predators who agreed to the peace accords not out of need, but out of pragmatism. The universe is more interesting with variety, even if some of that variety is prey. Close enough, she allowed. And what do you think of us? Dangerous question, but Seraphi had said to be authentic. Honestly, you terrify me. You're everything humanity spent millennia having nightmares about. Beings that see us as food, that live in darkness, that have powers we can barely comprehend. But you're also stuck. No offense intended, but from an outsider's perspective, you've been having the same arguments about blood purity and tradition for thousands of years. It's like you've achieved immortality, but forgotten to keep living. The silence that followed was deafening. I was pretty sure I'd just signed my own death warrant with express delivery. Then, the matriarch smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Too many teeth. Too much predator. But it seemed genuinely amused. "Oh, granddaughter, you do find the most interesting toys." "He's not a toy," Seraphi said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "No." The ancient vampire rose from her throne, moving with liquid grace that made my eyes hurt trying to follow. "Then what is he? This human who thinks managing waste is diplomacy, who admits to fear but stands in our hall anyway. What possible value could he have beyond momentary amusement?" She was suddenly in front of me, having crossed the room in less than a heartbeat. This close. I could see that her eyes weren't just red, but contained depths of crimson that spoke of ages beyond human comprehension. Looking at her was like staring into the history of violence itself. "Perhaps," she said, reaching out one perfectly manicured finger to touch my chest, right over my heart. "We should find out." The touch was ice and electricity, and the memory of every nightmare I'd ever had. I felt something pulling at me, not physically but deeper, like she was trying to unravel what made me myself. Images flashed through my mind. My childhood on Earth's orbital platforms. My first day on Venus Station. The bet with Jax. Meeting Seraphi. The research I'd done on Ulvalan culture. The fear and determination that had brought me here. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The matriarch stepped back, her expression unreadable. "Interesting," she said. "You're exactly what you appear to be. No hidden agendas, no secret training, no ulterior motives. Just a human who fixes things and tells terrible jokes. How wonderfully absurd." "I also make decent coffee," I managed, though my voice came out shakier than I'd have liked. "If you use the term decent very loosely." That military vampire was definitely laughing now. Even some of the stuff-looking nobles seemed to be fighting smiles. "You may stay for dinner," the matriarch declared, returning to her throne. "Try not to die. It would be inconvenient to clean." As she settled back into her seat, the gathering resumed its normal flow. Conversations restarted. Shadows went back to their independent dancing, and I remembered how to breathe. "You did well," Seraphi murmured, guiding me toward a less crowded corner. "Grandmother rarely allows humans to leave after a mind touch. She must have seen something she liked." "What did she see?" "The truth. That you're here because you want to be. Not because anyone ordered you to be. That you're terrified but staying anyway. That you actually do think sewage management is a form of diplomacy." She smiled. "That you're already half in love with me despite knowing exactly how dangerous I am." I stopped walking. How did... "She's 4,000 years old. Riven. She can read the story of your life in your heartbeat. Don't worry. I'm rather flattered. Though falling for someone on the first date is terribly human of you. In my defense, you're wearing a dress made of actual stars. That's pretty hard to compete with. This old thing," she did a little spin that made the cosmos swirl around her. "I threw it together at the last minute." "Right. Just casually threw together an outfit that defies several laws of physics. As one does." We were interrupted by the arrival of the young military vampire, who brought with him two others, a female with scholarly patterns, and a male whose markings I couldn't identify. "Envoy Chase," the military one said with something that might have been a smile. "I'm Commander Dravik Valtir. These are my clutch siblings, Scholar Lysara and, well, we just call him Wraith. He doesn't do titles. The family disappointments," Wraith added cheerfully. "We're the ones who think maybe eating other sapients isn't a great basis for civilization." "Wraith," Lysara hissed, "you can't just say that." "Why not? It's what everyone's thinking. Besides, the human knows what we are. Look at him. He's terrified but trying not to show it. I respect that. I prefer cautiously optimistic about not being dinner, I said. Dravik actually grinned, showing fangs that seemed more playful than threatening. See, he has humor. When was the last time anyone at these gatherings had humor? Uncle Morteus told a joke once. Lysera recalled. About 600 years ago. No one laughed. Because it was about draining a planet dry, Wraith pointed out. Genocide isn't generally comedic gold. These younger Ulvalin were nothing like what I'd expected. They reminded me more of the younger generation on Venus Station, beings who'd grown up in the post-Accord universe and didn't see other species as just resources or threats. So, Dravik said, Seraphi tells us you're working on the station's integration systems. How do you handle the crystalline frequency requirements? We've been having issues with harmonic interference in the military quarters. And just like that, I found myself in a technical discussion with vampire nobility about frequency modulation and crystalline harmonics. It was surreal, but also oddly comfortable. These were problems I actually knew how to solve, unlike the social minefield of ancient vampire politics. The trick is to create buffer zones using the Meloran acoustic dampening fields, I explained, warming to the subject. They naturally absorb the frequencies that cause crystalline resonance, while allowing other communications to pass through. We installed them in Sector 7 last year, and complaints dropped by 80%. Brilliant, Lysara said, producing what looked like a datapad made of crystallized blood. Could you send me the specifications? I've been trying to solve this problem in my laboratory for decades. Sure, though I'll need to translate them from human standard notation. You're doing it again, Seraphi interrupted, amused. Solving problems, being useful, making yourself indispensable. It's what I do, I said with a shrug. I can't fight like Commander Dravik, or research like Scholar Lysara, or... What do you do, Wraith? Disappoint my parents, mostly, though I'm also quite good at atmospheric sculpture. Right. I can't do any of those things, but I can make sure everyone has the right environment to do what they're good at. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. The best kind of diplomacy, Dravik mused. Making yourself too useful to eat. That's definitely going on my performance review. Achieved survival through aggressive helpfulness. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The gathered vampires began moving toward what I assumed was the dining area. Fair warning, Seraphi said quietly. Dinner can be intense for non-Ulvalin. You won't be expected to partake in the traditional feeding, but watching might be disturbing. Define disturbing. We're vampires, Riven. What do you think we eat? Right, that. The dining hall was another study in beautiful horror. The table was a single piece of what looked like frozen midnight, with places set for each guest. The chairs were tall, throne-like things that made everyone look regal and predatory. I was guided to a seat next to Seraphi, directly across from Uncle Vorthak, who looked like he was hoping I'd spontaneously combust. Other beings were brought in, volunteers, Seraphi assured me quietly, who were compensated extremely well for providing fresh feeding. They wore white robes that contrasted sharply with their varied skin tones and species. Most looked resigned, some eager, a few nervous. The peace accords regulate this extensively, Lysara explained, apparently noticing my discomfort. Willing donors only, strict health monitoring, limited quantities. It's more ceremony than sustenance these days. We can survive perfectly well on synthesized alternatives. But tradition demands the real thing for formal gatherings, Vorthak added, his tone suggesting what he thought of beings who preferred synthesis. A human woman in white robes was led to the matriarch. She looked calm, almost serene, as she knelt beside the ancient vampire's chair. When the matriarch's fangs extended and pierced the offered wrist, I expected screams or struggle. Instead, the woman's expression became almost euphoric. The bite contains natural anesthetics and euphoriants, Seraphi explained quietly. It's quite pleasant, actually. Some beings become addicted to it, though that's strictly regulated now. Around the table, other Ulvalan began feeding. It was weirdly formal, almost ritualistic. No violence, no struggle, just an ancient predator-prey dynamic wrapped in ceremony and consent forms. A young man was brought to stand between Seraphi and me, human, probably mid-20s, with the kind of augmented musculature that suggested he did this professionally. He smiled at me reassuringly. "First time seeing a feeding?" he asked. "It's not as bad as it looks. Actually kind of nice. Once you get used to it, the pay's excellent, and the Ulvalan are surprisingly good about boundaries." Seraphi hadn't moved to feed. She was watching me, those crimson eyes unreadable. "You're not eating," Vorthak observed. "Is your pet too squeamish for you to feed in front of him?" "I'm choosing not to feed," Seraphi replied evenly. "As is my right. You coddle the human sensibilities. How far you've fallen, niece. Or how far I've risen, depending on your perspective." The tension between them was sharp enough to cut. I made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. "She's not abstaining for my sake," I said. "If she wants to feed, she should. I'm a guest here. It would be rude of me to impose my cultural values on your traditions." Vorthak's eyes narrowed. "You give her permission as if she needs it." "I'm not giving anyone permission. I'm just saying that me being human shouldn't change anyone's dinner plans. That would be like me insisting everyone eat pizza because I'm here." "What's pizza?" Wraith asked. "Human food involving bread, cheese, and infinite arguments about toppings. Pineapple on pizza has caused more debates than most trade agreements." "Sounds dreadful," the matriarch said. "We must try it sometime." Seraphi still hadn't fed. The professional donor was starting to look a bit awkward, standing there untouched while everyone else was mid-meal. "You know," I said to him, "I've always wondered, what's it actually like, the feeding thing? Everyone talks about it in abstract terms, but what's the actual experience?" He brightened, clearly happy to have something to do besides stand there. "Oh, it's wild. Like, you know that feeling when you're half asleep and everything's warm and soft. It's like that, but more intense. The initial bite stings a little, but then it's all endorphins and floating. Some vampires are better at it than others, though the young ones sometimes get too eager, but the older ones, they make it an art form." "Fascinating dinner conversation," Vorthak muttered. "Would you prefer we discuss the weather? Though I suppose on a space station, that's limited to still no atmosphere outside." Wraith choked on what he was drinking, which looked like wine but probably wasn't. Dravik pounded him on the back while trying not to laugh. "Tell me, human," the matriarch said suddenly. "What do you think of our traditions? Speak truthfully. I'll know if you lie." Everyone stopped talking. All eyes turned to me, waiting. "I think," I said slowly, "that every species has traditions that seem strange or disturbing to outsiders. Humans eat other animals, which horrifies some herbivore species. The crystallines consume electricity in ways that would kill most organic beings. The void dancers literally eat space-time distortions, which I can't even pretend to understand." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Your traditions come from what you are, apex predators who happen to evolve consciousness and spaceflight. The fact that you've modified those traditions to accommodate consent and coexistence is actually pretty impressive. How many species would have just kept taking what they wanted?" "Some would say we're weakening ourselves," Vorthak interjected, "diluting our nature to appease lesser beings." "Some would be wrong," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Adapting isn't weakness. It's evolution. The strongest species isn't the one that never changes. It's the one that changes just enough to survive new environments. And like it or not, The new environment is a galaxy full of species that won't tolerate being treated as prey. You speak as if we need the approval of others, Vorthak sneered. Don't you? Even the Ulvalan can't fight the entire galaxy. And why would you want to? You've got art, science, culture that spans millennia. Why waste that on wars you don't need when you could be building something greater? And what would a mayfly like you know of building something greater? Not much, I admitted. But I know that the station's been running for 50 years because hundreds of species figured out how to share space. I know that the Melloran Collective and the Hive Consciousness went from centuries of war to co-developing the best medical technology in the galaxy. I know that humans went from barely reaching our own moon to having tea with vampires in the orbit of Venus. If that's not building something greater, I don't know what is. The silence stretched. Then the matriarch laughed. Actually laughed. Not the cutting sound from before, but something almost warm. Oh, I like this one, she said. Seraphi, you may keep your pet. He amuses me. He's not, Seraphi started. I know what he is and isn't. Granddaughter, I can smell the attraction between you like ozone before lightning. But more than that, I can see what you see in him. He speaks truth wrapped in humor, finds profound meaning in mundane things, and stands before predators while reeking of fear, yet never backing down. Very human. Very interesting. She waved a hand, and the donors began withdrawing. The one near us gave me a friendly nod before leaving. You still haven't fed, Vorthak observed, glaring at Seraphi. No, she agreed. I haven't. Is this some kind of statement solidarity with your human? It's a choice, Seraphi said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of alien foods I couldn't identify, and conversations that ranged from art to politics to whether humans really put pineapple on pizza. This seemed to fascinate them. I found myself relaxing incrementally. These ancient predators were still terrifying, but they were also people, with their own conflicts and interests and terrible senses of humor. As the evening wound down, I excused myself to find what the Ulvalan used for bathrooms, answer something that defied description, but worked well enough. On my way back, I got turned around in the maze of corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves when I wasn't looking. Lost, little human! I turned to find Uncle Vorthak blocking the hallway. Without the crowd around, he seemed even larger, more predatory. His shadow writhed independently, reaching toward me with grasping tendrils. Just admiring the architecture, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The way it shifts between dimensions is fascinating. Is it? He moved closer, and I had nowhere to retreat. As fascinating as my niece, as fascinating as playing diplomat in halls where your kind would once have been cattle. I'm not playing at anything. I'm here because Seraphi invited me. Yes, her little rebellion, bringing home a human to shock the family. Did she tell you that's all you are? A statement. A way to irritate traditionalists like me. Actually, yeah, she was pretty upfront about it. That seemed to surprise him. And you came anyway? Seemed interesting. How often does a systems engineer get to have dinner with vampire nobility? It's definitely going in my autobiography. Your autobiography, he repeated, amused. Tell me, what will you title the chapter where you die for insulting your betters? His hand moved faster than I could see, suddenly around my throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was clear. Or perhaps the chapter where you learn why we ruled the darkness between stars for millennia. Why other species whispered our names in fear. Why even now, constrained by your precious accords, we are still apex. Uncle? Seraphi's voice came from directly behind Vorthak. I hadn't heard her approach, hadn't seen her move, but suddenly she was there, and the temperature in the corridor dropped several degrees. Unhand him. I'm merely educating your pet about reality, Vorthak said, but his grip loosened slightly. Someone should... The only reality here is that you're assaulting my guest in our family home. Grandmother would be disappointed. They stared at each other, predator to predator, and I had the distinct feeling I was watching a confrontation that had been building for centuries. Family dynamics were complicated enough when everyone wasn't immortal vampire nobility. Finally, Vorthak released me with a dismissive gesture. Keep your pet, niece. But when this game of yours ends badly, remember that you were warned. He vanished, not walked away, just stopped existing in that spot. Vampires and their dramatic exits. You okay? Seraphy asked, her hands ghosting over my throat, checking for damage. Fine. Just another fun family gathering. Your uncle's a charmer. He's an ass. Always has been. Probably always will be. Are you sure you're all right? He didn't... I'm fine. Really. Though I could use some air. You know, the kind that doesn't smell like impending violence. She laughed softly. Come on. I know just the place. She led me through more twisting corridors to a balcony I was pretty sure hadn't existed in three-dimensional space until we needed it. Outside, Venus's eternal storm raged, but some kind of force field kept us in a bubble of calm. The view was spectacular, roiling clouds lit by constant lightning, the massive bulk of Venus Station Alpha floating in the distance like a technological mountain. I'm sorry about Vorthak, she said, leaning against the railing that was probably made of crystallized nightmares, or something equally impossible. He represents everything I'm trying to change about our society. Change is hard, especially when you've had thousands of years to get set in your ways. Is that your professional opinion, Special Envoy? That's my I fix systems for a living opinion. The older a system is, the more patches and workarounds and legacy code it accumulates. Sometimes you can upgrade incrementally. Sometimes you need to replace the whole thing. The trick is knowing which approach won't crash everything. And which approach do you recommend for the Ulvalan? I moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Honestly, you're already doing it, bringing in new perspectives, challenging assumptions, making connections outside your species. It's slow, but it's working. Your cousins in there, they're nothing like what I expected. They give me hope, she admitted. Every generation has a few more who question the old ways. In another 1,000 years, maybe we'll actually be the evolved species we pretend to be. 1,000 years? God, I can't even imagine. I'll be dead before your society even notices I existed. She turned to look at me, those crimson eyes reflecting the lightning. You're wrong. You've already made an impression. The matriarch doesn't remember most beings she meets. But she'll remember you, the human who thinks sewage is diplomacy and stood up to Vorthak without flinching. I absolutely flinched. There was definite flinching. Inside, maybe. But outside, you held your ground. Do you know how few beings do that? Even other Ulvalan usually defer to him. Yeah, well, I figured if he was going to kill me anyway, I might as well go out with some dignity. Plus, backing down seemed like it would just make things worse. You were right. Showing weakness would have triggered his hunting instincts. By standing firm, you confused him. Prey isn't supposed to banter. Great. I survived through conversational confusion. That's definitely going in the autobiography. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Venus's atmospheric violence. It was oddly peaceful, in a watching the apocalypse from a safe distance kind of way. Can I ask you something? I said eventually. Of course. Why didn't you feed, and don't say it was just choice. There was more to it than that. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful, almost vulnerable. I wanted to. The hunger is always there. You know, it's part of what we are. But sitting there, with you beside me, watching you try so hard to understand and accept, I realized I didn't want you to see me that way. Not yet. Seraphy, I know it's foolish. You already know what I am. You've seen others of my kind feed. But there's a difference between knowing and seeing. And I care what you think of me. More than I expected to. I took a risk and reached out, covering one of her hands with mine. Her skin was still cool, but I was getting used to it. I think you're incredible, I said. Terrifying. Definitely. Way out of my league. Absolutely. But also brave and principled and trying to change things that have been broken for millennia. The feeding thing. It's part of who you are. It doesn't change anything. Doesn't it? Could you really watch me sink fangs into someone and still want to... She trailed off. Still want to what keeps seeing you. Have more conversations about infrastructure while your uncle plots my demise. Watch you wear dresses made of impossible things. Yeah. I think I could handle it. She turned her hand under mine, interlacing our fingers. Her grip was careful, controlled, but I could feel the strength behind it. This is dangerous, she said. Not just Vorthak and the traditionalists. I'm dangerous. We're not designed to be compatible. Humans and Ulvalan. There's no precedent for it ending well. Good thing I specialize in making incompatible systems work together. This isn't a technical problem you can solve with buffer zones and frequency modulation. No, I agreed. But maybe it doesn't need to be solved. Maybe it just needs to be navigated day by day, adjustment by adjustment. Maybe that's enough. She laughed, soft and a little sad. Optimism, such a human trait. Someone's got to balance out all the vampire brooding. We don't brood. We contemplate eternally. Sure, that's totally different. She squeezed my hand, then let go. We should get you back to the station. You have work tomorrow, and I've monopolized enough of your time. Best monopoly ever. 1 star. Would not recommend to others because I want to keep it all to myself. Did you just review our date? Would you prefer a formal evaluation? I could create a feedback form. She shook her head, smiling. Come on. My ridiculous human. Let's get you home before Vorthak decides to make another educational attempt. The journey back was less disorienting than the trip there, though the shadow space still made my atoms feel questionable. Seraphy walked me to the docking ring, where the transport would return to the main station. Thank you, she said. For tonight, for being yourself, for not running when any sensible being would have. Sensible's overrated. Besides, someone recently told me I'd die interesting. Might as well make it spectacular. Is that what this is? Your spectacular death? Nah, this is my spectacular life. The death part can wait. She kissed me then, quick and cool and tasting of starlight and danger. Before I could respond, she'd stepped back, shadows already gathering around her. I'll message you, she said. And then she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of midnight impossibilities. I stood there for a moment, fingers pressed to my lips, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. Then I laughed, because really, what else could I do? Jax was going to lose his entire mind when he found out about this. The transport back to my quarters was uneventful, just me and my thoughts and the lingering adrenaline from surviving dinner with vampire nobility. My reflection in the transport window looked shell-shocked but oddly happy. Like I'd just discovered that jumping off cliffs was terrifying, but also exhilarating. My neural implant pinged with a message just as I reached my door. From Seraphy. Forgot to ask, what exactly is pineapple on pizza, and why does it cause debates? I grinned and typed back, humanity's greatest culinary controversy. I'll explain over dinner. Somewhere with less risk of being murdered by your relatives. Her response was immediate, deal. But I make no promises about the murder risk. I find it adds spice to the evening. Vampires and their need for dramatic tension, I replied. Humans and their need to put fruit on bread products. We all have flaws. I was still smiling when I collapsed into bed, exhausted but wired. Tomorrow I'd have to go back to fixing systems and pretending this was all totally normal. But tonight I'd survived dinner with vampires, faced down an ancient predator, and somehow started something with an impossible woman who wore stars like jewelry. Life on Venus Station had just gotten a lot more interesting. The next morning hit me like a cargo hauler at full thrust. My neural implant screamed alerts about my shift starting in 30 minutes. But my body felt like it had been disassembled and reassembled by someone working from memory. Apparently, surviving vampire nobility took more out of you than a double shift in the fusion cores. Chase. Jax's voice exploded through my comm unit. "Where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you all night." "Sleeping," I mumbled into my pillow. "Like normal humans do. Normal humans don't go dark for 12 hours after creating fake dating profiles. I thought the app had somehow killed you, which, given some of the species on there, isn't outside the realm of possibility." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "About that?" "Oh God, oh no, what did you do?" "I maybe went on an actual date." Silence. Then, "With what species? Please tell me it was something safe. Like a Melloran. They're basically just tall humans with better singing voices." "Ulvelen." The silence stretched so long, I thought the connection had dropped. Then, Jax started laughing. Not normal laughter. The hysterical kind that suggested someone's grip on reality had just snapped. "You're joking," he finally managed. "You have to be joking. Nobody's that stupid. Not even you. Third heir to the Crimson Throne, specifically." "I'm coming over. Right now. Don't move. Don't do anything. Just try not to die before I get there." He arrived 15 minutes later, using his maintenance override codes to burst into my quarters like a man on a mission. His expression cycled through disbelief, horror, and something that might have been impressed admiration. "Show me," he demanded. "Show me the messages. Show me proof that you, Riven Chase, professional nobody, actually went on a date with vampire royalty." I pulled up the conversation history on my wall display. Jax read through it 3 times, his expression growing more complicated with each pass. "She knew you were lying," he said finally. "Immediately? And she still wanted to meet you." "Apparently." "And you actually went?" "Seemed rude not to." He collapsed onto my couch, head in his hands. "This is my fault. I pushed you to make the profile. I turned it into a bet. And now, you're going to end up drained and mounted on some vampire's wall because I thought it would be funny." "I'm not going to end up on anyone's wall," I said, pulling on my work coveralls. Probably. Probably that's your reassurance. Probably." "Look, she's different. Not like the stereotypes. She's trying to reform their society, build bridges with other species. Last night was actually kind of amazing." "Last night? What happened last night?" So I told him. About the Umbral Lounge, the family gathering, the ancient matriarch who could read your entire life story in a heartbeat. About Uncle Vorthak and his charming death threats. About younger vampires who laughed at my jokes and asked about frequency modulation. About standing on an impossible balcony watching Venus storm while holding hands with someone who could kill me without effort, but chose not to. Jax's expression went through another series of transformations before settling on resigned acceptance. "You're in love," he said. "You absolute madman. You've fallen for a vampire." "I'm not." "You are. I can see it on your face. That dopey expression that says, 'I've made terrible decisions and I'd make them again.' It's been one date. One date where you met her family, survived her homicidal uncle, and apparently impressed a 4,000-year-old matriarch with your waste management skills." He shook his head. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" My implant pinged. A message from Seraphi. "I hope you survived the night. Vorthak is still complaining about your insolence, which means you made quite an impression. Free tonight." I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Jax groaned. "You're seeing her again. Tonight, apparently." "Riven, buddy, pal, friend who I desperately don't want to see eviscerated. Maybe pump the brakes. Take some time to think about this rationally." "Since when have I ever done anything rationally?" Valid point. But there's irrational, like, I'm going to reprogram the coffee makers to play music. And there's irrational, like, I'm going to date someone who literally feeds on life force. She uses synthesized alternatives, I protested. Oh, good. Your vampire girlfriend is vegetarian. That makes everything safer. I finished getting ready while Jax continued his litany of all the ways this could go wrong. He had a point. Several points, actually. But none of them seemed to matter against the memory of Seraphi's laugh, or the way Starlight had looked caught in the fabric of her dress. Work was a blur of routine maintenance and system checks. I found myself going through the motions, half my mind still in that impossible house with its breathing walls and dimensional shortcuts. Every so often, I'd catch myself smiling at nothing, which earned me concerned looks from coworkers. You feeling all right, Chase? Supervisor Thex asked during the afternoon briefing. You seem distracted, more than yesterday, even. I'm fine, Supervisor. Just thinking about some integration problems. The romantic kind. His secondary eyes narrowed. Did the date with the Ulvalin actually happen? You're still alive, so I assume it went well. It went, interestingly good or interestingly, I'm being hunted by vampire nobility now. Yes. He made the regalian equivalent of a sigh, which involved 3 of his 4 arms making dismissive gestures. Humans, you survive by pure luck and audacity. Try not to die on shift. Chase. The paperwork would be horrendous. The day dragged on. I found myself checking messages more often than usual, half expecting Seraphi to cancel, or for this all to have been some elaborate fever dream. But her messages came throughout the day. Little observations about the station, questions about human culture, commentary on her family's ongoing drama. Uncle Vorthak has submitted a formal complaint about diplomatic irregularities regarding your visit. One message read, Grandmother told him to, and I quote, stop whining like a newly turned fledgling. I think she likes you. Your grandmother scares me more than your uncle, I replied. Smart man. Vorthak would just kill you. Grandmother would make you interesting first. By the time my shift ended, I'd changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something that said, I'm totally comfortable dating vampire nobility, while also, please don't eat me. I settled on dark pants and a shirt that didn't have any visible stains or repair patches. This time, Seraphi met me at the station proper, in one of the mid-level districts where different species mingled more freely. She wore something more subdued than her family gathering outfit, a deep purple dress that only violated physics a little bit. Her shadow hair was pulled back in a way that made her facial patterns more visible, intricate silver lines that seemed to pulse with their own light. You came, she said, and there was something almost vulnerable in her voice. Did you think I wouldn't? After last night, after Vorthak, I thought you might reconsider. Most beings would. Yeah, well, we've established I'm not most beings. Shall we? She'd chosen a restaurant in the neutral quarter, a place that catered to multiple species with wildly different dietary needs. The Starfall Cantina was famous for its ability to serve everything from photosynthetic light meals to the superheated plasma some species required. It was also public, brightly lit, and full of witnesses. Message received, she was trying to make me comfortable. We got looks as we entered. A human and an Ulvalin together was unusual enough. A human with the third heir to the Crimson Throne was gossip that would spread through the station by next shift. Is this okay? I asked, as we were seated in a booth that adjusted automatically to accommodate our different physiologies. People staring, I'm used to it. The question is whether you are... Please. Yesterday I had 3 different species yell at me for mixing up their atmospheric requirements. I accidentally gave the chloros too much nitrogen, and they spent an hour speaking only in limericks. Public attention is nothing compared to an angry plant person rhyming their complaints. She laughed, and several nearby diners turned to look. An Ulvalin laughing was apparently even rarer than one dating a human. The waiter, A cheerful Quellion whose tentacles moved in what I'd learned was their version of a smile. Took our orders. Seraphi requested synthesized blood with trace minerals, the vampire equivalent of a nice wine. I ordered something that claimed to be pasta, but probably wasn't. So, I said once we were alone again, tell me about this reform movement of yours. Last night you mentioned trying to change things. But what does that actually look like? She leaned back, considering. Have you ever tried to renovate a building that's been standing for thousands of years? One where every brick is sacred to someone. Every room has historical significance, and half the residents insist that structural damage is actually character. Can't say I have, but I've worked on legacy systems that sound similar. The kind where changing one line of code might crash 17 unrelated processes. Exactly. That's Ulvalan society. We've been doing things the same way for so long that most can't imagine any other possibility. The young ones adapt. They grow up in a universe where cooperation is necessary. But the elders... She shook her head. They remember when we were the only significant power in our sector, when other species were either food or irrelevant. But things are changing. Slowly. Every generation has more who question the old ways. My cousins last night, Dravik, Lysara, Wraith, they represent hundreds of others who think similarly, but less openly. We meet, we talk, we push for small changes, allowing synthesized alternatives at formal gatherings, opening cultural exchanges, permitting relationships with other species. That last one seems like it might be a hard sell, given your uncle's reaction to me. You have no idea. There hasn't been a recognized interspecies relationship involving Ulvalan nobility in over 1,000 years. The last one ended badly. Define badly. 3 dead, 2 star systems under quarantine, and a treaty that took 50 years to negotiate. I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. Okay, that's pretty badly. In fairness, that was during our more aggressive period. We're much more civilized now. Your uncle tried to strangle me last night. Yes, but he didn't follow through. Progress. Our food arrived, and we fell into the comfortable rhythm of a normal date. We talked about our work, her research into sustainable feeding practices that could eliminate the need for living donors, my ongoing battle with the station's increasingly complex integration requirements. She asked about human entertainment, leading to a lengthy explanation of why we insisted on making movies about AI uprisings despite actively creating AI. You create intelligences you expect to rebel, she asked, fascinated. That seems counterproductive. Right, but we keep doing it. It's like we're programming our own doom and selling tickets to watch it happen. Humans are even stranger than I thought. Tell me more. So I did. I told her about Earth's chaotic history, our weird obsession with exploring places that could kill us, our ability to pack bond with literally anything. She countered with tales of Ulvalan civilization, arts that spanned millennia, cities that existed partially outside normal space, the time they accidentally created a pocket universe and had to figure out how to uncreate it before it developed its own physics. Wait, I said. You can't just drop "we accidentally created a universe" and move on. I need details. It was about 6,000 years ago. A group of researchers were experimenting with dimensional folding, trying to create more efficient storage space. They folded one too many times and suddenly had a self-contained reality bubble growing in the lab. What did you do? Argued about it for 300 years while it kept expanding. By the time we figured out how to collapse it safely, it had developed its own elementary particles. We still don't know if anything was living in there when we shut it down. That's horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. The researcher responsible still gets hate mail about it. Imagine being known for 6 millennia as the one who might have committed accidental genocide. Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A group of Ulvalan had entered, young ones by their patterns. But their body language screamed trouble. They spotted us immediately, zeroing in like predators who'd found something interesting. Friends of yours? I asked quietly. Vorthak's spawn, Seraphi replied, her voice carefully neutral. His actual children and their cohort? This should be fun. The group approached our table with the kind of casual menace that suggested they'd practiced it in mirrors. The leader, who had Vorthak's build, but with more elaborate silver patterns, stopped just short of looming. Cousin Seraphi, he said, managing to make the familial term sound like an insult. We heard the most amusing rumor, that you were seen in public with a human. We had to verify such an impossibility for ourselves. Hello, Mordek, Seraphi replied, her tone suggesting this wasn't their first unpleasant encounter. Still struggling with the concept of none of your business. I see. When the third heir degrades herself, it becomes everyone's business. His crimson eyes fixed on me. And this must be the pet. It's smaller than I expected. Most things look small when you have the personality of an overcompensating black hole, I said before my brain could stop my mouth. Silence. Then one of Mordek's companions, a female with patterns that suggested she was very young by Ulvelan standards, snorted with quickly suppressed laughter. Mordek's expression went through several interesting variations of offended, "You dare!" He dares quite frequently, Seraphi interrupted. It's one of his charms. Now, unless you have something constructive to add, we're in the middle of dinner. With a human, eating their processed waste while you sip synthetic substitutes like some kind of reformed addict. Better than being an unreformed asshole, I muttered. This time, two of his companions had to turn away to hide their reactions. Mordek himself had gone an interesting shade that suggested his circulatory system was doing complicated things. You let it speak to us like this, he demanded of Seraphi. I let him speak how he chooses. That's what equals do in a relationship. Something you might understand if anyone could tolerate your presence long enough to date you. Oh, that hit a nerve. Mordek's patterns flared bright enough to hurt to look at directly. When the Crimson Circle hears about this, they'll what? Seraphi stood. And suddenly the air around our table grew cold. Her shadow expanded, reaching out in ways that made my hindbrain scream warnings. Complain to grandmother, she's already aware. Submit formal protests. Vorthak tried that this morning. Challenge me directly. We both know how that would end. The temperature dropped another few degrees. Other diners were actively moving away now, recognizing predator dynamics, even if they didn't understand the specifics. Or, Seraphi continued, her voice carrying harmonics that made my bones ache. You could walk away, find someone else to bother. Maybe reflect on why you're so threatened by a human that you had to interrupt his meal. Mordek wanted to push. I could see it in every line of his body. But something, wisdom, fear, or maybe just the realization that his backup was looking increasingly uncertain, made him step back. This isn't over, cousin. You're making a mockery of everything we are. No, Seraphi said quietly. I'm trying to save it. But you're too blinded by Vorthak's rhetoric to see that. He left with his group, though not without several backward glares that promised future unpleasantness. The female who'd laughed at my joke caught my eye for a moment. Something like curiosity in her expression before she followed the others. Seraphi sank back into her seat, the temperature returning to normal. I'm sorry about that. Mordek has all of his father's worst qualities and none of his intelligence. Does this happen often, the confrontations? It's been increasing since word got out about us. The traditionalists see it as an attack on everything they believe in. She smiled wryly. Which, to be fair, it kind of is. Should I be worried? About Mordek, no. He's all posturing and no substance. It's the quiet ones you need to watch for. She paused. Are you worried? I mean, this is only going to get more complicated. I thought about it. Really thought about it. The sensible thing would be to walk away now, before the traditionalist vampires decided I was worth more than threats. Before whatever this was between us got serious enough to cause real problems. Before I fell any harder for someone I could never really have a future with. Nah, I said finally. Complicated I can handle. It's boring that kills me. She smiled. And it was worth every future complication I could imagine. We finished dinner without further interruption, though I noticed other Ulvalen in the restaurant watching us, with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Word would spread. By tomorrow, half the station would know about the human dating vampire nobility. "Want a walk?" Seraphi asked as we left. "There's something I'd like to show you." She led me through sections of the station I'd never seen before. Areas where the architecture started showing Ulvalan influence. Shadows that bent wrong. Corners that contained more space than they should. Artwork that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at it. "This is the old quarter," she explained. "When the station was first built, each species got sections designed for their comfort. Most have been renovated for multi-species use, but some remain." We stopped at what looked like a dead-end corridor until Seraphi touched a specific spot on the wall. Reality folded, and suddenly there was a doorway that hadn't existed a moment before. "After you," she said. I stepped through and forgot how to breathe. It was a garden, but not like any garden I'd ever seen. Plants, if you could call them that, made of living shadow, grew in impossible configurations. Flowers bloomed in colors that human eyes shouldn't have been able to perceive. The ceiling showed not the station's standard panels, but what looked like deep space, complete with slowly rotating galaxies. I couldn't find words. One of the few remaining Ulvalan preserves on the station. We're allowed to maintain them as cultural sites. I come here when I need to think. It's incredible, beautiful, and terrifying, and I don't have the vocabulary for this. Most species don't. Our aesthetics developed in places where light was negotiable and physics was more like guidelines. She moved deeper into the garden, and I followed. When we first encountered other species, they couldn't even perceive half of what we created. We had to learn to translate beauty into forms others could appreciate. We found a bench, or something bench-like, that looked out over a pool of liquid starlight. The surface reflected not our images but possibilities, showing versions of us that might have been or could still be. "Can I ask you something?" I said, settling beside her. "Always. Why me, really? Not the answer you gave before about making statements or shocking your family. Why did you message me that first night?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the possibility pool shift through potential futures. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Have you ever felt like you were drowning in your own life? Like every choice was predetermined by thousands of years of tradition? Every path already walked by countless ancestors?" She turned to look at me. "That's what it's like being Ulvalan nobility. Your entire existence is mapped out before you're even born. Who you'll associate with, what you'll study, who you'll eventually mate with to produce the next generation of pure-blooded predators." Sounds suffocating. "It is. Then I saw your profile. This human claiming to be a diplomat while talking about chocolate and capsaicin. It was so absurd, so utterly removed from anything in my world. And when I confronted you about the lie, you didn't grovel or make excuses. You made a joke about being special. Do you know how long it's been since someone surprised me? You mentioned centuries. Longer. And then you kept surprising me, standing up to Vorthak, making my grandmother laugh, treating the whole insane situation like it was just another integration problem to solve. You look at me and see, what? Someone brilliant who's trying to change things. Someone funny and dangerous and beautiful. Someone who wears impossible dresses and makes me want to learn shadow physics just to understand her artwork better. You don't see a predator, a monster from your species' nightmares? Oh, I definitely see a predator. It's kind of hot, honestly. The monster thing. Monsters don't worry about being monsters. They just monster. You're something else. She kissed me then. Properly this time. Not the quick brush of lips from the night before, but something deeper, more intent. Her lips were cool but not cold, and kissing her felt like tasting moonlight. When she pulled back, we were both breathing harder than the simple act warranted. "This is dangerous," she said again, but this time it sounded less like a warning and more like a promise. "I'm good with dangerous." We stayed in the garden for hours, talking about everything and nothing. She showed me plants that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, fountains that flowed upward through time, art that could only be fully appreciated by beings who could see in spectrums I couldn't imagine. I told her about Earth's bioluminescent bays, about auroras dancing across polar skies, about humans who climbed mountains just because they were there. "Your species is insane," she concluded, after I finished explaining free solo climbing. "You see a vertical death trap and think, I should climb that with no safety equipment." Says the woman whose species accidentally created a pocket universe and argued about it for 3 centuries. That was research. Your people do it for fun. Fun is important. What's the point of living forever if you're not enjoying it? She went still in that way Ulvalen did when processing something significant. I never thought of it that way. Immortality is opportunity rather than burden. See, humans are good for something besides comic relief. I'm beginning to see that. Her communicator chimed, an elegant sound like crystal bells. She frowned at the display.
What is it?
Family summons. Formal one. Her frown deepened. From grandmother herself. Is that bad? It's unusual. Especially this soon after last night. She stood, and I could see her shifting into what I was starting to recognize as her public persona. Cooler, more formal, every inch the third air. I should go. Want backup? I can threaten people with my knowledge of plumbing. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not this time. This is something I need to handle alone. She paused, then added, Be careful getting back to your quarters. Mordek isn't dangerous, but he's not the only one who disapproves of us. I'll be fine. I've got a midnight shift in Sector 7 anyway. Nothing says safety like being surrounded by industrial equipment. Riven. Hey, I caught her hand. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. That's what we do. Right, make incompatible systems work. Right. She squeezed my fingers, then let go. I'll message you. Then she was gone. Stepping through shadows in that impossible way, her people moved. I made my way back through the station, trying to shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the careful balance we'd been maintaining was about to tip one way or another. My shift in Sector 7 was routine maintenance, checking pressure seals, adjusting atmospheric mixtures, making sure the pyrophyte waste disposal hadn't developed any new, exciting ways to explode. Normal, boring work that left too much time to think. Chase. My supervisor's voice crackled through the comm. Got a situation in subsection C. The crystalline harmonic dampeners are acting up again. On it, I replied, grateful for the distraction. The dampeners were indeed acting up, creating a feedback loop that had the local crystalline workers in various states of distress. Their forms flickered and chimed discordantly as I worked to isolate the problem. It's getting worse. One of them harmonized at me, their voice like a broken wind chime. Ever since the new residents moved into C7, the frequencies have been unstable. New residents. I pulled up the housing manifest. The unit in question had been empty for... Oh no. The Crimson Circle had established a presence on the station. According to the records, 3 high-ranking Ulvalan traditionalists had taken residence just 2 days ago, right after word got out about Seraphi and me. The timing wasn't coincidental. Found the problem. I told the crystalline workers, someone's running an unauthorized shadow field generator. It's interfering with your resonance. Can you fix it? I could, but fixing it would mean confronting whoever was running illegal equipment in their quarters. Equipment that Ulvalan traditionalists might use to, say, create untraceable meeting spaces or hide activities from station security. I'll need to file a report, I said carefully. This is beyond standard maintenance. Please hurry, the crystalline harmonized. The dissonance is painful. I filed the report, flagging it for security attention. Then, because I apparently had more curiosity than sense, I decided to take a closer look at the source of the interference. The corridor outside C7 was darker than it should be, shadows pooling in ways that defied the overhead lighting. My instruments showed reality distortions consistent with high-level Ulvalan technology, the kind usually restricted to their homeworlds. "What are you doing here?" I spun to find the young female vampire from Mordek's group, the one who'd laughed at my jokes. Up close, I could see her patterns were unusual, more geometric than the flowing designs most Ulvalan sported. "Maintenance," I said, holding up my scanner. "Illegal shadow fields are interfering with the crystalline workers." "You should leave," she said, but it sounded more like concern than threat. "This isn't a safe place for humans, especially not you. You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are, the human who's corrupting the third heir." She tilted her head, studying me. "Though you seem less corrupting and more confused." "Story of my life. Look, Ms. Nissa, Mordek's clutch sister, unfortunately. Nissa, someone in there is running equipment that's hurting other residents. I can't just ignore that. Even if reporting it puts you in direct conflict with beings who already want you dead. Especially then. That's kind of how humans work. Tell us not to do something dangerous, and we immediately want to do it twice." She laughed, a sound like silver bells in a minor key. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "I get that a lot, usually both." "The Crimson Circle is meeting tonight," she said suddenly. Then looked surprised at herself for saying it. "They're discussing what to do about Seraphi's corruption. Some want to challenge her directly. Others think removing you would solve the problem more efficiently." "And which camp is winning?" "The efficient one. Dead humans cause less political complications than dead heirs." "Fantastic. Any idea what their timeline looks like? I've got a lot of shifts scheduled this week." She stared at me. "You're joking. They're discussing your murder and you're making jokes. It's either that or panic, and panic doesn't fix harmonic dampeners." "You're insane, all of you. Your entire species." "Yeah, we get that a lot too." She glanced back at C7, then seemed to make a decision. "The meeting ends at local midnight. Station security has been notified about potential code violations in this section. Whatever you're going to do, don't be here when they adjourn." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Mordek's an ass. But he's still family. If he participates in murdering you, he'll face execution under station law. I'd rather not lose a clutch brother to his own stupidity." She paused. "And because you made me laugh. That's rare." She vanished into the shadows before I could respond, leaving me alone in a corridor that suddenly felt a lot more dangerous. I finished my work quickly, making sure the report was thoroughly documented and filed with both maintenance and security. Then, I got the hell out of Sector 7, taking a deliberately circuitous route back to safer areas. My implant chimed as I reached the main transit hub. A message from Seraphi. "Family meeting was interesting. Can't talk now. Stay safe, please." Well, that wasn't ominous at all. I made it back to my quarters without incident, though I found myself checking shadows more carefully than usual. Once inside, I activated every security protocol I had access to, and some I probably wasn't supposed to know about. Then, I sat on my couch and tried to process the fact that alien vampire nobility were actively planning my murder. My life had gotten very strange very quickly. Another message arrived, this time from an unknown sender. "You have friends you don't know about. Not all Ulvalan follow the old ways. Be at the observation deck. Section 12 at 0200, come alone. Because meeting mysterious vampires in isolated locations had worked out so well for me so far. But I'd already made my choice, hadn't I? The moment I'd responded to Seraphi's first message, I'd stepped onto a path that led away from boring safety and toward whatever this was becoming. I checked the time. 3 hours until the mysterious meeting. Just enough time to update my will and maybe figure out what one wore to a potentially fatal clandestine encounter. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired, but oddly determined. Like a man who'd decided that if he was going to die, at least it would be for something interesting. "You're an idiot, Riven Chase," I told my reflection. But I was already reaching for my jacket. The observation deck in Section 12 was one of those places that existed on the station maps, but rarely saw visitors. Too far from the main thoroughfares, with a view of Venus's night side that most found unsettling. Perfect for clandestine meetings with mysterious vampires, who may or may not want me dead. I arrived 10 minutes early, partly to scope out potential escape routes, and partly because waiting in my quarters was making me twitchy. The deck was empty, just transparasteel windows showing the roiling darkness of Venus below, occasionally lit by massive lightning storms that looked like neurons firing in some planet-sized brain. "You actually came?" I managed not to jump, though my heart definitely tried to escape through my throat. 3 figures emerged from shadows I could have sworn were empty seconds ago. I recognized Commander Dravik from the family gathering, along with Scholar Lysera. The third was unfamiliar, an older Ulvalan with patterns that seemed to shift and change as I watched. "I have a bad habit of walking toward danger instead of away from it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Character flaw." "Or survival trait," the unknown vampire said. Her voice carried the weight of age, though not the crushing ancient presence of the matriarch. "Sometimes, the most dangerous path is standing still." "Riven Chase," Dravik said formally. "May I present Counselor Varric Soldarin. She speaks for the Progressive Alliance." "The what now?" Lysara stepped forward, her scholarly demeanor from the dinner replaced by something more urgent. "Not all Ulvalans support the old ways. The Progressive Alliance has been working for centuries to modernize our society. Seraphe isn't alone in her beliefs. She's just the most visible. And that visibility has accelerated certain conflicts," Counselor Varric added. "The Crimson Circle's presence on this station is not coincidental. They're here to make an example." "Of me or Seraphe?" "Both, ultimately. But removing you is simpler. Less political fallout." She studied me with those shifting eyes. "Unless we complicate their narrative." "I'm listening." Dravik pulled up a holographic display from a device that looked like crystallized shadow. "The Crimson Circle operates on tradition and perception. Right now, you're seen as a weak point. A human who somehow enchanted the third air through unknown means." "Unknown means I told jokes and fixed toilets. Very mystical." "Exactly," Lysara interjected. "They can't comprehend someone gaining influence through normalcy. It doesn't fit their worldview. So they're creating a different story, that you're a spy, or using human pheromones, or part of some elaborate plot to weaken Ulvalan bloodlines." "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is. But it's a ridiculous that fits their prejudices." Counselor Varric moved closer, and I caught a scent like ozone and old books. "They need you to be a threat because the alternative, that Seraphe simply chose you, undermines everything they believe about Ulvalan superiority." "So what do you suggest? I can't suddenly become threatening enough to justify their paranoia?" "No," Dravik agreed. "But you can become valuable enough that killing you creates more problems than it solves." "How?" "Tell me," Counselor Varric said. "What do you know about the station's integration protocols, the deep systems that allow multiple species to coexist in the same space?" "I know them backwards and forwards. It's literally my job." "And if those systems were to suddenly experience cascading failures, not enough to cause real danger, but enough to cause significant inconvenience. I saw where this was going. You want me to sabotage the station? We want you to become indispensable, Lysara corrected. The Crimson Circle has been exploiting loopholes in the integration systems for their shadow fields. If those loopholes were to close, requiring someone with your specific expertise to maintain stable workarounds, then killing me becomes a practical problem, not just a political one. I thought about it. That's either brilliant or insane. Welcome to Ulvalan politics, Dravik said dryly, where the two are often indistinguishable. There's more, Counselor Varix added. The matriarch has taken an interest in you. That's unusual. She hasn't involved herself directly in succession politics for over a millennium. But your presence at the family gathering stirred something. Terror, probably. I was terrified enough for both of us. Amusement, actually, and curiosity. Two things the matriarch rarely experiences anymore. She paused. If you were to formally register as a diplomatic contractor, not claiming false titles, but offering your genuine expertise in integration systems, it would provide legal protections. And trap the Crimson Circle, Dravik added. They can't openly move against a registered contractor without cause. It would violate station law and bring unwanted scrutiny. Plus, Lysara said, excitement creeping into her voice, it would legitimize your relationship with Serafe, not as some scandal, but as a logical alliance between complementary skill sets. I stared out at Venus's storms, processing everything. 3 weeks ago, my biggest concern was whether the cafeteria would have real coffee. Now I was discussing political schemes with vampire progressives, while other vampires plotted my murder. What does Serafe think about all this? I asked. The three exchanged glances. She doesn't know we're here, Counselor Varix admitted. The family meeting tonight was contentious. The matriarch neither condemned nor endorsed your relationship, which the Crimson Circle took as tacit permission to act. Serafe is currently in damage control mode. She's protecting you, Dravik said bluntly. Making concessions, calling in favors, trying to build enough political cover to keep you safe. It's limiting her effectiveness in other areas. Areas like the actual reform movement she's been working on for centuries, Lysara added. Every moment she spends defending your relationship is a moment not spent on systemic change. So you want me to protect myself so she can focus on the bigger picture. We want you to become an asset, rather than a liability, Counselor Varix said. The Progressive Alliance has resources. We can fast-track your contractor registration, provide documentation of your expertise, even arrange for some convenient system failures that require your specific skills. All I have to do is intentionally break things I've spent years maintaining. Sometimes destruction is a form of creation, she replied. Your human philosophers understood this. Creative destruction, they called it. They also called it job security through manufactured crisis. But that was usually considered unethical. Dravik actually laughed. Ethics in politics, you really are new to this. I wanted to refuse. Every professional instinct I had rebelled against deliberately sabotaging systems I'd worked so hard to perfect. But then, I thought about Serafe, fighting battles on multiple fronts just to keep me safe. About the Crimson Circle, plotting murder because they couldn't accept that their worldview might be wrong. About Nissa, warning me despite her loyalty to family. Fine, I said, but we do this my way. No actual danger to station residents. Any failures have to be inconvenient, not catastrophic. And I want everything documented. If this goes wrong, I'm not taking the fall alone. Agreed, Counselor Varix said immediately. Lysara will work with you on the technical aspects. Dravik will handle security, and I'll manage the political maneuvering. What about Serafe? Do we tell her? After it's done. Plausible deniability is a gift in situations like this. Varix smiled, and it was almost warm. She chose well with you. Riven Chase. Many would have run by now. Yeah, well, apparently I have more curiosity than self-preservation instinct. The best humans often do, Lysara observed. It's why your species accomplishes so much in such short lifespans. No time for excessive caution. We spent the next hour planning. Lysara had identified 17 vulnerabilities in the integration system that the Crimson Circle was exploiting. We could patch them in ways that would require constant maintenance. Maintenance only someone with my specific knowledge could provide. Start tomorrow, Dravik instructed. Make it look like routine work at first. The failures should seem natural, cascading from the patches. I know how to make systems fail, I said. I've spent years preventing exactly these scenarios. Ironic, isn't it? Counselor Varix mused. Your expertise in preservation becomes expertise in controlled destruction. Story of my life lately. 2 weeks ago, I was just a guy who fixed things. Now I'm apparently a political player in vampire succession drama. Welcome to the game, Dravik said. Try not to die. They left the way they'd come, dissolving into shadows like smoke in reverse. I stayed on the observation deck, watching Venus turn below, trying to reconcile who I'd been with, who I was becoming. My implant chimed. Seraphi, where are you? Your quarters are empty. Observation deck, section 12, I replied. Needed to think. She arrived faster than should have been possible, shadows coalescing into her familiar form. She looked tired, something I hadn't known Ulvalan could look. You shouldn't be alone in isolated areas, she said. Not now. I'm fine. Had some guardian angels watching out for me? Her eyes narrowed. Who? Does it matter I'm safe? You're here. And Venus continues to be a terrifying ball of atmospheric rage. All is right with the universe. She moved to stand beside me at the window. The family meeting was difficult. The matriarch refuses to take a stance, which means the Crimson Circle feels empowered to act. I've bought us time, but not much. How much? Days. Maybe a week if I call in every favor I'm owed. She turned to me, and I could see the weight she was carrying. I'm sorry. This isn't what you signed up for. Pretty sure I signed up for exactly this. You were very clear about the danger. I thought I'd have more time to ease you into it, to build proper protections. Instead, I've thrown you into deep space without a suit. Good thing humans are adaptable. She reached out, fingers ghosting over my cheek. I could end this, distance myself from you, make it clear the association is over. The circle would back off. Would you end it? To keep you safe, yes. Her hand dropped. In a heartbeat. And if I don't want to be kept safe, then you're a fool. Already established, but I'm your fool, apparently. She laughed, but it was strained. This isn't a joke, Riven. They will kill you. Not dramatically. Not with warning. You'll simply stop existing. And the investigation will find nothing because the investigators will be Crimson Circle sympathizers. I know. I caught her hand, interlacing our fingers. But here's the thing. I've already died. She blinked. What? Not literally. But the version of me from 3 weeks ago. The guy who fixed systems and made bad jokes and went home to an empty quarters every night he's gone. You killed him with that first message. And I'm not interested in resurrecting him just because his life was safer. That's the most romantically morbid thing anyone's ever said to me. I have my moments. She pulled me into a kiss that tasted like starlight and danger and the edge of forever. When we broke apart, her eyes held something fierce and protective. If you're going to insist on staying in this madness, she said, then we do it properly. No more separate quarters. You move into the Ulvalan section with me. My personal space has security even the circle wouldn't dare breach. Moving in together, isn't that moving a bit fast? By human standards, yes. By the standard of keeping you alive, it's overdue. She paused. Unless... Is it too fast? I sometimes forget you measure time differently.
sci-fi, I just admitted I'm willing to face assassination for you. I think we've blown past conventional relationship timelines. Is that a yes?
That's a yes. We made it back to my quarters without incident, though I noticed Seraphi checking shadows more frequently than usual. Packing didn't take long. The advantages of living simply. My possessions fit into 2 cases with room to spare. Is this everything? She asked, surveying my meager belongings. I travel light. Easier to run away when necessary. No running. Not anymore. She picked up one of my cases like it weighed nothing. Ready. As I'll ever be for cohabitating with vampire nobility. The journey to the Ulvalan section felt like crossing into another world. The lighting gradually shifted from station standard to something softer, shadows deepening until they seemed to breathe. Other Ulvalan watched us pass, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. Seraphi's quarters were not what I expected. Instead of the gothic opulence of her family home, the space was almost minimalist. Clean lines, subtle shadow work that created depth without ostentation. One wall was entirely transparent, offering a view of space that seemed somehow deeper than normal viewports allowed. It's perfect, I said. You expected something more dramatic. Coffins and skulls and Baroque nightmare furniture. Honestly, that's my uncle's aesthetic. I prefer spaces that let me think. She gestured to a section that had clearly been prepared for me. A workstation with interfaces for station systems. A bed designed for human physiology. Even what looked like a coffee maker. You planned this. I hoped. Even if you'd run. I wanted to be ready if you came back. She set down my case with exaggerated care. The building has its own integration system, separate from the main station. You can access your work remotely, and the security is comprehensive. Comprehensive meaning anyone who enters without authorization gets shunted into a pocket dimension until security decides what to do with them. That seems excessive. That's the reduced setting. The full security system is much less friendly. I spent the next hour setting up my workspace, connecting to the station's systems through layers of encryption that made my eyes water. Everything looked normal from the maintenance side. No alerts, no failures, no indication that tomorrow I'd start deliberately breaking things I'd spent years perfecting. You're troubled, Seraphi observed, watching me work. Just thinking about tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? Routine maintenance. Nothing special. The lie tasted bitter, but Counselor Varix had been clear. Plausible deniability was a gift. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Be careful with your routine maintenance. The station's been temperamental lately. Did she know, or was this just general concern with Seraphi? It was hard to tell. I'm always careful, I said. No, you're competent. There's a difference. Careful people don't date outside their species when assassination is on the table. Point taken. She moved behind me, arms wrapping around my shoulders. Her chin rested on top of my head, and I could feel her cool breath against my hair. I love you, she said quietly. I should probably wait for a more romantic moment, but given our circumstances, waiting seems foolish. I spun my chair around to face her. You love me. Desperately. Inconveniently. Against all logic and centuries of conditioning. She smiled wryly. My grandmother would say it's proof I've gone mad. What do you say?
That madness might be underrated. She cupped my face in her hands. You don't have to say it back. I know humans have different timelines for these things. Seraphi, I've been in love with you since you asked about pineapple on pizza. I just figured a guy who fixes toilets shouldn't presume to love someone who wears stars.
You beautiful idiot. You still don't understand your own value, do you? I'm starting to. Having multiple vampires plot my death tends to clarify things. She kissed me again, and this time there was nothing careful about it. When we finally broke apart, We were both breathless in ways that had nothing to do with oxygen exchange. Bed, she suggested. God, yes. Later, tangled in sheets that felt like woven moonlight. I traced the silver patterns on her skin. They pulsed gently under my touch, responding to stimuli in ways that suggested they were more than decorative. Do they mean something, the patterns? They tell stories, lineage, achievements, connections. This one, she guided my finger to a swirl near her shoulder, appeared when I completed my first successful hunt. This cluster here marks my scholarly achievements. And this? She moved my hand to a new pattern over her heart, still faint but definitely there. This one's new, I observed. It appeared 3 days ago, the night we first met. She smiled at my expression. Pattern manifestation isn't always immediate. Sometimes it takes time for significance to crystallize. What does it mean? Roughly translated, catastrophic romantic decision. My body is literally marking my terrible life choices. Romantic really sells the relationship. The exact translation is more nuanced. Something like choosing love despite logic. But that doesn't capture the fatalistic undertones. Your biology comes with editorial commentary. The patterns reflect truth, not preference. They're frustratingly honest sometimes. I studied the new mark, still processing the idea that her body had physically changed because of me. Does it hurt? No. It tingles sometimes, when I think about you. Very inconvenient during family meetings. Your vampire biology gets tingly. Apparently, you're corrupting me in ways I didn't know were possible. We lay in comfortable silence, her cool skin a pleasant contrast to the warmth I generated. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings watching them. What happens tomorrow? She asked eventually. Really? So much for plausible deniability. I do my job. Keep the station running. Make sure incompatible systems play nice together. And if those systems develop complications, then I fix them. It's what I do. She shifted to look at me directly. The Progressive Alliance contacted you. Not a question. I kept my expression neutral. What makes you say that? Because I know Varix's handiwork. Dravik's been mysteriously busy. Lysara canceled our research meeting. And you're here in my quarters instead of hiding in yours. Which suggests someone gave you a reason to feel safer. Maybe I just really wanted to see your etchings. My etchings are in another dimension. I'll show them to you later. She sat up, shadows wrapping around her like a robe. What did they propose? Does it matter the decisions made? Riven. They want me to become indispensable. Create problems only I can solve. Make killing me inconvenient rather than just immoral. Ah. She was quiet for a moment. It's a good plan. Risky. But good. The Circle values practical concerns over principles. You're not angry. Why would I be angry? You're taking action to protect yourself. That frees me to focus on other battles. She smiled. Plus, watching the Circle realize they need you alive will be delicious. You're a little bit evil. You know that. I'm a vampire, darling. Evil is part of the package. I just aim mine at deserving targets. Like your uncle. Especially my uncle. He's going to be furious when he realizes his own shadow field usage created the vulnerabilities you'll exploit. You know about the shadow fields. I know everything that happens in Ulvalan politics. I just can't always act on it. She pulled me back down beside her. Tomorrow changes things. Once you start, there's no going back. The Circle will know you're not just some random human. Good. I'm tired of being underestimated. That's my human, diving headfirst into danger with a smile. Someone recently told me the most dangerous path is standing still. Wise woman. You should listen to her. I intend to. We made love again. Slower this time. Mapping each other's bodies like explorers charting new worlds. Afterward, she taught me to see the patterns in her shadow garden, how each plant told part of her family's history. victories and defeats encoded in organic form. "This one commemorates the Treaty of Broken Stars," she said, indicating a flower that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. "My great-great-grandmother negotiated the peace. Took 40 years and cost 3 systems. But it held." And this, I pointed to a withered section. "The Purge of 2387. When we tried to exterminate the synthetic collective." Her voice carried old shame. "We failed, obviously. The synthetics forgave us eventually. But the garden remembers."
"It's beautiful and terrible."
"Like most Ulvalan things, we're not good at half measures."
"I've noticed."
My implant chimed with shift reminders. In 6 hours, I'd start reshaping the political landscape of the station. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt oddly calm. "Whatever happens," Seraphy said, reading my mood, "we face it together." "Together," I agreed. Outside, Venus continued its eternal storm, indifferent to the small beings making grand promises in its shadow. But that was fine. We didn't need planetary approval. We just needed each other, and the courage to build something new from the ruins of what everyone said was impossible. The first system failure occurred at Airweight 32 exactly as planned. I was 3 levels down in the maintenance core when the alerts started cascading across my displays. Atmospheric processors in the Ulvalan section stuttering, harmonic dampeners fluctuating, gravity generators developing micro-oscillations that made everyone slightly queasy, but weren't actually dangerous. "Chase, supervisor." Thex's voice crackled through the comm. "What in the 17 hells is happening?" "Checking now," I replied, fingers flying across interfaces I knew better than my own reflection. "Looks like feedback loops in the integration protocols. Someone's been running unauthorized equipment that's destabilized the baseline parameters." Not a lie. The Crimson Circle's shadow fields had created exactly these vulnerabilities. I was just helping them manifest. "Can you fix it?" "Working on it. But supervisor, these aren't standard errors. The shadow field interference has created novel instabilities. I'll need to design custom workarounds for each affected system." "How long?" "To patch everything properly, days, maybe weeks, and that's assuming no new complications." His curse translated poorly across species, but the sentiment was clear. "Do what you can. I'll start filing the paperwork for your contractor upgrade. If you're going to be our only expert on shadow field integration conflicts, we need it official." Step 1 complete. The next few hours were controlled chaos. I fixed problems as they arose, but my solutions were deliberately temporary, brilliant band-aids that would hold just long enough to prove their necessity before requiring adjustment. Each fix deepened my integration into the station's critical systems. Impressive work? I didn't jump this time. After a week of dating Seraphy, I was getting used to vampires materializing from nowhere. Scholar Lysara stood behind me, watching my displays with professional interest. "Shouldn't you be less obvious about checking up on me?" I asked, not looking away from my work. "I'm here officially. The university wants documentation of these new instability patterns for research purposes." She produced a datapad that probably did contain legitimate research. "The fact that I'm also monitoring your progress is merely convenient." "How's it looking from your end?" "Better than projected. The Crimson Circle is already complaining about the degraded conditions in their quarters. Vorthak had to cancel a meeting because the shadow fields kept inverting." "Tragic." "Quite. Oh, and your supervisor's contractor filing has been mysteriously fast-tracked. You should have official status within the cycle. The Progressive Alliance has fingers in station bureaucracy. We have fingers everywhere. How do you think reform movements survive centuries of opposition?" She paused, watching me reroute a particularly stubborn process. "You're quite good at this, breaking things. I prefer to think of it as creative restructuring. Is that what humans call it?" "Among other things." She left as quietly as she'd come, but not before transferring a data packet to my personal files. Inside were detailed analyses of other shadow field vulnerabilities, complete with suggestions for exploitation. The Progressive Alliance really had been planning this for a while. By lunch, I'd handled 17 critical failures, each one cementing my reputation as the only person who understood the new instabilities. Word spread through the maintenance crews first, then up through administration. By the time I made it to the cafeteria, beings were looking at me with something between respect and concern. "Is it true?" Jax intercepted me before I could grab food. "The shadow field thing. Is what true? That you're the only one who can fix it? That the Ulvalen tech is so weird, it requires some kind of specialized knowledge that only you have?" "I wouldn't say only me," I hedged, "but I do seem to have a knack for it." "A knack?" He stared at me. "Riven, you've been here 4 years. In that time, you've been competent, reliable, and occasionally creative. But this is next-level stuff. It's like you suddenly became a genius overnight. Maybe I was always a genius and just needed the right crisis to shine. Or maybe dating a vampire is doing something to your brain. If only he knew. Seraphi's not doing anything to my brain except making it very happy. Happy brains don't usually develop sudden expertise in alien technology conflicts. Mine does. It's a gift." He clearly didn't buy it. But the afternoon rush started before he could interrogate me further. I spent the rest of lunch fielding questions from other engineers, all wanting to know how I'd figured out the shadow field interactions so quickly. "Pattern recognition," I told them, which was true enough. Once you understand the base frequencies, the rest follows logically. What I didn't tell them was that Lysara's data packet included frequency analyses going back decades. I wasn't discovering anything. I was implementing solutions the Progressive Alliance had been developing for years. My implant chimed with a priority message from station administration: "Contractor status approved. Report to Central Admin for documentation." That was fast. Suspiciously fast. But I wasn't complaining. Central Admin was in the station's heart, where the gravity was most stable and the architecture most boring. The administrator who handled my paperwork was a Melloran named Supervisor Hari, whose singing voice probably could have made rocks weep, but who chose to work in bureaucracy instead. "Mr. Chase," she harmonized, her voice making even my name sound musical. "Your expedited contractor status. Sign here, initial here, DNA sample here." That was quick. "Emergency protocols. The station can't afford to lose your expertise during this crisis." She leaned forward conspiracially. "Also, someone very high up made it clear delays would be inadvisable." "The matriarch." I couldn't say. But when someone who predates the station by millennia expresses interest in paperwork processing speed, we process speedily. So the ancient vampire was watching. Wonderful. I signed documents, provided biological samples, and received my new credentials. A quantum encrypted badge that would identify me as essential personnel with diplomatic protections. It felt heavier than its physical weight suggested. "Congratulations," Supervisor Hari sang. "You're now officially irreplaceable. Try not to let it go to your head. I'll do my best to remain humble while saving the station from shadowfield collapse. See that you do. Arrogance is terribly unattractive in humans." I made it back to the Ulvalen section without incident, though I noticed increased security presence in the corridors. Station security had apparently decided the technical failures warranted extra vigilance. Good for general safety, potentially bad for vampires planning murder. Seraphi's quarters were empty when I arrived, but she'd left a note. An actual physical note written on something that might have been paper, but felt like crystallized moonlight. "Family summoning. Again. Uncle demands answers about the system failures affecting his shadow fields. Try not to reshape the entire station while I'm gone. S?" I smiled despite the situation. Even her notes carried that mix of affection and snark that I'd fallen for. The next few hours were productive. I worked from sci-fi systems, implementing more targeted failures that specifically impacted Crimson Circle operations, while leaving progressive-friendly areas untouched. It was petty, perhaps, but making Vorthak's life inconvenient felt like justice. "You're enjoying this too much." Nissa stood in the doorway, having somehow bypassed the security that should have shunted her into a pocket dimension. She looked tired, stressed in a way that made her seem older than her patterns suggested. "How did you get in here?" "sci-fi gave me access codes years ago. We were close once, before ideology divided our families." She entered uninvited, examining the space with something like nostalgia. "I see she's redecorated. Less dramatically vampire, more functionally elegant." "Did you need something, or is this a social visit?" Warning: the Circle knows what you're doing, not the specifics, but they've connected the failures to your sudden expertise. Mordek's pushing for direct action despite the contractor protections. "Let me guess, assassination disguised as an accident." "Nothing so crude. They're planning to discredit you, make it seem like you caused the failures in the first place, then botch the repairs, strip your contractor status, and leave you vulnerable." I leaned back in my chair, processing this. "That's actually clever. You're taking this very calmly for someone whose death is being actively plotted." "Panic doesn't fix integration protocols. Plus, I've got backup plans." The Progressive Alliance. At my surprised look, she almost smiled. "Please, Varix has been recruiting for decades. Half the younger generation has at least listened to her proposals. I've sat through several presentations myself." "But you didn't join." "I'm not brave enough. Easier to stay quiet, stay safe, express disagreement through small rebellions." She gestured vaguely, like warning humans who make my clutch brother foam at the mouth with rage. "I appreciate the heads up." "Appreciate it by surviving. If you die, Mordek becomes insufferable and Seraphi goes on a rampage that probably ends with half the Circle in pieces." She moved toward the door, then paused. "She loves you. You know, really loves you. I've never seen her patterns pulse like they do when you're mentioned." "Her patterns pulse. Like little stars going supernova. It's disgustingly romantic." She stepped through the doorway. "Try not to die, Riven Chase. You make eternity more interesting." Then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of iron and midnight. I added her warning to my growing list of concerns. The Crimson Circle was adapting faster than expected. Time to accelerate the plan. I triggered 3 more failures in rapid succession, each targeting systems the Circle relied on. Their private meeting chambers lost atmospheric stability. Their communication networks developed encryption errors. Their food synthesis units started producing everything with a subtle aftertaste of garlic. That last one was just for fun. "Chase." My supervisor's voice exploded through the comm. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster. We've got cascade failures in 3 sectors." "On it," I replied, already moving. "But supervisor, I need expanded access. These failures are interlinked in ways standard permissions don't cover." "Done. You've got full system access as of now. Try not to accidentally vent us all into space." Full system access. The keys to the kingdom, or at least the space station. With this, I could make myself truly indispensable. I worked through dinner, skipping food in favor of energy supplements that tasted like regret and caffeine. The failures were becoming more complex, interacting in ways even I hadn't fully predicted. But with each fix, my integration deepened. Soon, removing me would be like trying to remove a load-bearing wall. Technically possible, but likely to bring everything crashing down. "You look exhausted." Seraphi had returned, still in formal wear that made my work clothes look even shabbier by comparison. She moved behind my chair, cool hands sliding onto my shoulders. "How was the family thing?" "Productive. Uncle Vorthak spent 20 minutes ranting about the convenient timing of the failures."
Grandmother told him that perhaps relying on illegal shadow fields wasn't the wisest choice. He turned an impressive shade of purple.
Purple's not a normal vampire color.
Not even slightly. I think he invented a new emotional state. Her hands started working at the tension in my shoulders. The Progressive Alliance sends their compliments. By the way, your work has exceeded expectations.
They were there.
Of course not. But Grandmother was. And she's been surprisingly well informed about certain reform movements lately.
I spun to face her. The matriarch is Progressive Alliance.
The matriarch is 4,000 years old and bored out of her ancient mind. She's not Alliance, but she's not opposed to them either. Your presence has given her an excuse to shake things up without taking direct action.
She smiled. You're not just my catalyst for change, apparently. You're hers too.
I feel used. Welcome to vampire politics. Everyone uses everyone, but at least we're upfront about it. She pulled me to my feet. Come on, you need food, rest, and possibly a shower. You smell like ozone and determination.
Sexy.
On you, actually, yes, but let's add some soap to the mix. She was right, of course. I was running on fumes and stubbornness. But as we moved toward the residential area of her quarters, my implant screamed another alert.
Critical failure in Section C7. I read, that's
the Crimson Circle's unauthorized shadow field generator, Seraphi finished.
The one causing all the problems.
We exchanged looks. That's not one of mine, I said. I didn't trigger that.
Then who did? My implant chimed with a message from an unknown sender. Consider this a gift, M.
The matriarch, the 4,000-year-old vampire who supposedly stayed neutral, had just directly sabotaged the Crimson Circle. Your grandmother is terrifying, I told Seraphi. You have no idea, but right now, she's terrifying in our favor. She pushed me toward the shower. Clean up. I'll monitor the situation. If the Circle's main generator is failing, they'll be too busy with damage control to plot murder tonight. The shower was a marvel of engineering, using sonic pulses and precisely controlled water streams to clean more thoroughly than any human technology I'd encountered. I let it work its magic while my mind raced through implications.
The matriarch's intervention changed things. If she was willing to act directly, even secretly, it meant the traditional power structures were already shifting. The Progressive Alliance had more support than they'd revealed, and I was somehow at the center of it all, a human catalyst in vampire political chemistry.
When I emerged, Seraphi was at my workstation, her fingers dancing across displays with inhuman speed.
The C7 failure is cascading, she reported. The Circle's entire shadow network is collapsing. They'll need weeks to rebuild, and that's assuming they can find someone willing to help them. Which they won't, because I'm the only expert and I'm mysteriously unavailable for Crimson Circle projects.
Exactly. Grandmother's gift has accelerated our timeline by months.
She looked up at me, crimson eyes bright with something like hope.
This might actually work. Real change, not just cosmetic reforms. All because I lied on a dating profile.
Best lie ever told. I moved to stand beside her, watching the cascade failures spread through the Circle's network like wildfire. Each collapse further cemented my importance to station operations.
What happens when they realize they've lost? I asked.
Then, things get dangerous. Cornered predators are the most vicious. She caught my hand, squeezing gently.
But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, we celebrate a victory.
What kind of celebration?
Her smile was pure predator, but the kind I'd learned to love. The kind that reminds us why we're fighting for this relationship in the first place. She pulled me away from the workstation, and for once, I didn't resist. The station could survive a few hours without my attention. The Crimson Circle could stew in their collapsing shadows. The Progressive Alliance could advance their pieces on the political board. Right now, I had a vampire to celebrate with, and tomorrow's problems could wait their turn.
But even as we fell into bed, even as Seraphi showed me exactly how vampires express joy, part of my mind kept working. The game had shifted. The matriarch's involvement meant the stakes were higher than anyone had admitted. And somewhere in the station, angry vampires were realizing their carefully maintained power structure was crumbling because one human had learned to exploit their weaknesses. "You're thinking too loud," Seraphi murmured against my throat. "Sorry, brain doesn't have an off switch." "Then I'll have to try harder to distract you." She did. And for a while, it worked. But later, in the artificial night cycle, while she rested beside me in that not-quite-sleep state, vampires entered. I stared at the ceiling and wondered what I'd really started. My implant showed 17 new messages from various department heads, all wanting my expertise on shadowfield conflicts. 3 from Progressive Alliance members congratulating me on the C7 incident. 1 from Nissa that just said, "Well played." And 1 from the matriarch herself. The game becomes interesting at last. Do try to survive it. No pressure. I closed my eyes, trying to rest before tomorrow's inevitable chaos. In a week, I'd gone from anonymous engineer to linchpin in a vampire political revolution. Jax was right. This wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. But normal was overrated anyway. Seraphi shifted beside me, one arm draping possessively across my chest. Her patterns pulsed gently, that new mark over her heart glowing softly in the darkness. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever the Crimson Circle attempted, we'd face it together. A human and a vampire against centuries of tradition. The odds were terrible. I couldn't wait to beat them. The Blood Expansion Conference was scheduled for neutral ground, the massive diplomatic sphere at the station's apex where artificial gravity could be adjusted for each species' comfort. 3 days after the Shadowfield collapse, and the Crimson Circle had been suspiciously quiet. "Too quiet," Seraphi said, adjusting her formal robes in front of the mirror. The garment was traditional, Ulvalan diplomatic wear, layers of shadow silk that moved like liquid darkness, decorated with silver patterns declaring her lineage, achievements, and political stance. "They're planning something." "They're always planning something," I replied, struggling with my own formal outfit. The Progressive Alliance had provided me with attire befitting a technical integration specialist with diplomatic standing, which apparently meant lots of unnecessary buckles and fabric that shifted between dimensions. The question is whether they'll try it at a conference with hundreds of witnesses. That's exactly when they'll try it. Maximum impact. Multiple species present to witness whatever narrative they've crafted. She turned to help me with a particularly stubborn clasp. "You don't have to come. Your contractor status doesn't require attendance at political gatherings." "Right. Let you walk into an obvious trap alone. That's definitely what a supportive boyfriend does." "Partner," she corrected softly. "In Ulvalan culture, you're my officially recognized partner now. Boyfriend sounds like something temporary." "Partner," I tested the word, liked how it felt. "Well then, as your partner, I'm definitely coming to watch you revolutionize vampire society." "Or die trying." "Optimism, remember human superpower." She kissed me, careful not to disturb either of our elaborate outfits. "Your optimism is going to get us both killed." "But what a way to go." The conference center was already packed when we arrived. Representatives from 43 species mingled in carefully climate-controlled sections. Universal translators working overtime to handle the linguistic chaos. The Ulvalan delegation occupied the darkest section, shadows pooling around them like territorial markers. "Niece!" Vorthak's voice cut through the diplomatic chatter. He stood with a contingent of Crimson Circle supporters, all wearing the deep red sashes that marked their allegiance. "And her pet. How progressive of you to bring him." "Partner," I corrected before Seraphi could respond. "The term is partner. I know multisyllabic words are challenging for you, but do try to keep up." His patterns flared, but before he could respond, a chime indicated the conference's beginning. Species took their designated places, or floating positions, or nutrient pools, depending on biology. The conference agenda was technically about expanding blood synthesis programs to reduce dependence on living donors. Progressive by Ulvalan standards. Revolutionary by Crimson Circle metrics. sci-fi had been working toward this for decades. The current donor system is unsustainable, she began, when her turn came to speak. Her voice carried across the sphere, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. As our population grows and spreads across the galaxy, maintaining ethical feeding becomes increasingly complex. Synthesis technology offers a solution that preserves our nature while respecting other species' autonomy. Synthesis is weakness, Vorthak interrupted, violating about 17 protocols. We are apex predators. We don't apologize for our nature. No one's asking you to apologize, Dravik interjected from the progressive section. We're asking you to evolve, unless you'd prefer to return to the pre-Accord days of hunting wars. At least then we were honest about what we are, someone from the Crimson Circle called out. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Other species representatives shifted nervously. The last hunting wars had devastated 17 systems before the peace accords. What we are, the matriarch's voice echoed through the sphere, is adaptable. Or have you forgotten our history? Vorthak. Every Ulvalan went still. The matriarch rarely attended conferences, preferring to influence from the shadows. Her presence here was significant. Grandmother, Vorthak said carefully, I merely defend our traditions. Our traditions include adaptation. When we first achieved spaceflight, we adapted to the void. When we encountered other sapients, we adapted to coexistence. Now, we must adapt again. Her crimson gaze swept the assembly. The question is, whether we adapt by choice or by force. Pretty words, a new voice said, but words won't save the mongrel. Mordek stepped from the shadows, and he wasn't alone. 20 Crimson Circle enforcers spread through the crowd, moving with predatory purpose. Several other species' security began reaching for weapons, but the vampires were already in position. What is the meaning of this? The conference moderator, a crystalline being whose neutrality was legendary, harmonized in distress. Justice, Mordek announced. We've discovered the source of the recent station failures. The human, Riven Chase, sabotaged our systems to create artificial dependence on his expertise. That's ridiculous. Is it? Mordek produced a data pad. Security logs showing you accessing shadow field generators, transmission records between you and known progressive agents. A clear pattern of failures beginning immediately after you gained system access. My blood went cold. They'd done their homework, taken true facts and twisted them into a damning narrative. Furthermore, Vorthak added, stepping forward, we have evidence of mental manipulation. The human has somehow influenced the third heir, corrupting her judgment through unknown means. Unknown means, I laughed, couldn't help it. The sound echoed through the sphere. You mean dating, having conversations, making her laugh. Those unknown means, you dare mock? I dare a lot of things. It's kind of my thing. I stepped forward, away from Seraphi's protective presence. You want to know the truth? Fine. I did access the shadow field generators to fix the problems you caused by running illegal equipment. I did talk to Progressive Alliance members after you started plotting my murder. And yes, the failures started after I gained access, because that's when I could finally see how badly you'd compromised station systems. Lies and deflection, Mordek snarled. You're nothing but a jumped-up maintenance worker who got lucky. Yes. The word stopped him mid-rant. Everyone stared. Yes, I repeated. I'm a maintenance worker, a nobody, a human who fixes things. I looked around the assembly, meeting eyes across species. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not special. I'm just a guy who lied on a dating profile and fell in love with someone impossible. You admit to the deception, Vorthak said triumphantly. I admit to everything. I lied about being a diplomat. I learned about your shadow fields because you were hurting other residents. I worked with the Progressive Alliance because you were trying to kill me. I smiled. And you know what I'd do it all again. Because in the last 2 weeks, I've seen more clearly than ever what's wrong with your society. How dare! You're stuck, I shouted over him. 4,000 years of the same arguments, the same power structures, the same fears. You're so terrified of change that you'd rather kill me than admit maybe, just maybe, there's a different way forward. Different like synthesis, Mordek sneered. Different like denying our nature. Different like choosing who you want to be instead of what tradition says you must be. Different like judging beings by their actions instead of their species. Different like... I caught Seraphi's eye, saw her small nod of encouragement. Different like a vampire and a human proving that love matters more than blood purity. Love, Vorthak spat the word. You corrupt our language as well as our air. I improve your vocabulary. Love, choice, growth, change. Concepts you've forgotten in your obsession with dominance. Enough! Mordek moved faster than my eyes could track. One moment he was across the room. The next, his hand was around my throat. The mongrel dies now. But Seraphi was faster. She hit him from the side, shadows exploding outward in a display that hurt to witness. They crashed into the assembly, other vampires scattering to avoid the violence. You dare attack my partner? Her voice carried harmonics that made reality shiver. You dare threaten what's mine? He's not yours, Mordek snarled back. He's prey food, a pet you've elevated beyond his station. They clashed again, moving at speeds that blurred them into streaks of darkness and violence. Other Crimson Circle members moved to join, but Dravik and the military progressives intercepted them. Within seconds, the conference had devolved into a vampire civil war. Stop this! The moderator's voice shattered through the chaos. This is neutral ground. No one listened. Centuries of suppressed conflict erupted in seconds. I scrambled back, trying to stay clear of superhuman combat. But Vorthak had other ideas. If we remove the cause, he said, advancing on me, order returns. That's your solution to everything, isn't it? I backed away, hand reaching for my datapad. Kill what confuses you. It's worked for 4,000 years. Has it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your perfect society is tearing itself apart. All because one human dared to love above his station. You love nothing. You're incapable of understanding. You're right. I stopped, backing away. I don't understand centuries of tradition or bloodline purity or whatever else you value. But I understand her. I pointed to where Seraphi fought, magnificent and terrible, shadows dancing around her like living things. I understand that she stays up too late researching synthesis improvements, because she genuinely wants to help her people evolve. I understand that she practices her conference speeches in the shower because she cares about getting the words right. I understand that she loves terrible human movies and can't cook to save her immortal life, and gets a little crinkle by her eyes when she's truly happy. My fingers found what I was looking for on the datapad, the emergency broadcast protocol I'd prepared days ago. I understand that she's fighting for a future where what you are matters less than who you choose to be. And if that threatens you so much you'd kill for it. I smiled. Then you've already lost. I activated the protocol. Every display in the conference sphere lit up with the same feed. Security footage from the last 10 minutes. Mordek's attack. The Crimson Circle's coordinated violence. Vorthak advancing on an unarmed human. All broadcast not just to the station, but across the diplomatic network to hundreds of worlds. What have you done? Vorthak whispered. What I do best. Found a technical solution to a social problem. I held up the pad. Amazing what you can accomplish with full system access and a little preparation. The fighting had stopped. Everyone stared at the displays showing their actions to the galaxy. The Crimson Circle's careful narrative, reasoned response to corruption, had been shattered by their own violence. You little... Vorthak lunged, but shadow wrapped around him mid-leap. The matriarch stood at the sphere's center, power radiating from her in waves that made everyone step back. "Enough," she said, and the word carried the weight of millennia. "The human is correct. We have been stuck, cycling through the same conflicts, while the universe moves forward without us." "Grandmother," Vorthak began. Silence. She hadn't raised her voice, but he collapsed as if struck. "You attack an unarmed being at a diplomatic conference. You threaten peace itself for the sake of your pride. You shame our entire species." He revealed, "There is a difference." She turned to address the assembly. "The Ulvalan formally apologize for this disruption. Those responsible will face judgment under our laws and station justice." "Matriarch," Seraphi said, moving to stand beside me. Blood, not hers, decorated her robes. "I request formal recognition." "Of what, granddaughter?" "Of my partner, Riven Chase, human, engineer, the one who makes me better than I am alone." The ancient vampire studied us for a long moment. "You would bind yourself to Mayfly years, watch him age and die while you remain." "I would take every moment we're given and be grateful for them." "Even knowing the pain that awaits?" "Especially then. The pain will mean it mattered." They stared at each other. 4,000 years of experience, meeting a few decades of determination. Then, the matriarch smiled. A real smile. Not the predator's expression I'd seen before. "So be it. The third heir has chosen. Let all witness. Riven Chase is recognized as her formal partner, with all protections and privileges that entails." Her gaze swept the Crimson Circle. "Any who threaten him, threaten the Valtir line itself. Choose your next actions carefully." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the progressive section, someone started clapping. Dravik, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Lysara joined him, then Wraith, then others. Soon the entire progressive faction was applauding, and even some traditionalists joined in. "This isn't over," Vorthak managed from where he knelt. "No," the matriarch agreed. "But your part in it is. You and your supporters will return to the homeworld for re-education. The Crimson Circle's influence ends today. Security forces, both station and Ulvalan, moved in to escort the subdued traditionalists away." Mordek shot me one last venomous look before being dragged off. I probably should have felt victorious, but mostly, I just felt tired. "You okay?" Seraphi asked, checking me for injuries with careful hands. "I'm fine, you?" "I'm excellent. Did you really prepare that broadcast in advance?" 3 different versions, actually. Wasn't sure which flavor of disaster we'd get. "My brilliant paranoid human." She kissed me, right there in front of everyone. "You realize what you've done? This will spread across the galaxy. Every species will see Ulvalan fighting each other over interspecies relationships." "Good. Maybe it'll start conversations elsewhere too. Or wars. Or change. Real change." I looked around the conference sphere, where beings were slowly returning to their seats. "Speaking of which, don't you have a synthesis proposal to finish presenting?" She laughed. "After all that, you want to continue with bureaucracy." "Especially after all that. Show them the Ulvalan can have a civil war and still handle business. Very professional." "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Now go revolutionize vampire culture. I'll be right here, broadcasting any other assassination attempts to the known universe." She kissed me again, then strode back to the speaking platform. The assembly slowly settled, and somehow, impossibly, the conference continued. Later, much later, we made it back to our quarters. Seraphi's robes were ruined. My formal wear was torn, and we were both exhausted. But we were alive, together, and officially recognized. "No taking it back now," I said, collapsing onto our couch. "You're stuck with me. However will I survive?" She curled against me, her cool presence a comfort after the day's chaos. My human partner, who publicly defeated the Crimson Circle through the power of love and technical documentation. Don't forget the sarcasm. The sarcasm was crucial. Of course, how could I forget the sarcasm? My implant chimed. Messages were pouring in. From the Progressive Alliance, from other species representatives, from humans who'd seen the broadcast. One stood out. Efficiently done. Your emotional approach improved outcomes by 43%. Most intriguing, X. I frowned. Do you know anyone with the initials X? Seraphi looked at the message. That's odd. The signature style looks like AI communication protocol. An AI messaged me about emotional efficiency. Apparently, though I didn't know any were monitoring the situation. Something about it nagged at me, but exhaustion won. I'd puzzle it out tomorrow. So what happens now? I asked. The Crimson Circle's broken. You've got matriarch support. Synthesis programs will expand. Victory achieved. Hardly. This was one battle in a very long war. But it's a start. She smiled against my shoulder. Plus, now I get to introduce my officially recognized human partner at all the family gatherings. Uncle Mortius is going to have a fit. The one who tells genocide jokes. That's him. This should improve his material significantly. Can't wait. We sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel past the viewport. Somewhere out there, the broadcast was spreading, carrying our story across the galaxy. A human and a vampire who'd proved that connection mattered more than convention. Not bad for a guy who'd lied on a dating profile. The aftermath of the Blood Expansion Conference was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion across the galaxy. Within hours, the broadcast had been viewed over 17 billion times. Within days, it had sparked discussions on thousands of worlds about interspecies relationships, traditional power structures, and whether one human sarcasm could indeed be weaponized for social change. You're famous, Jack said, staring at me with something between awe and horror. Like, actually famous. They're calling you the dating app savior on the human networks. Please tell me you're joking. I wish. There's already merchandise. Someone's selling t-shirts that say, I infiltrated an alien dating app and all I got was this lousy revolution. He showed me his tablet. Look, you're trending on 17 different species social networks. There's even a crystalline harmonic composition about you. I groaned, burying my face in my hands. We were in the station's human quarter, hiding in a small cafe that served real coffee and questionable pastries. I'd needed a break from the Ulvalan section, where vampires kept approaching to either congratulate me or challenge me to honor duels. Apparently, publicly humiliating the Crimson Circle made me very popular with progressives and very unpopular with everyone else. It gets better, Jax continued, scrolling through his feed. The Melloran News Network wants an exclusive. The Thoraxians are using your story in their mating education courses as an example of persistence despite biological incompatibility. And, he paused, eyes widening. Holy shit. What? The Galactic Council is forming a new committee, the Interspecies Relationship Commission. They want to establish formal protocols for cross-species romantic partnerships. He looked up. They want you to testify at the first hearing. Absolutely not. Riven. I'm an engineer, not a diplomat. I fix things, not talk to committees about feelings. You literally talked your way out of being murdered by vampires through the power of sarcasm and love declarations. That was different. That was survival. And this isn't, he leaned forward. Buddy, you and Seraphi just changed the game for millions of beings who thought crossing species lines was impossible. You don't get to hide in maintenance shafts anymore. My implant chimed with a priority message. From Seraphi. Family meeting in 20 minutes. Grandmother insists you attend. Formal dress required. Try not to panic. I have to go, I said, standing. Vampire family stuff. See, you're already living the diplomat life. Next thing you know, you'll be negotiating treaties and shit.
Don't curse my existence like that. I made it back to the Ulvalan section in record time, throwing on the least damaged formal outfit I owned. Seraphi met me at the door, looking amused. You're stressed, she observed. Your grandmother terrifies me. This is a reasonable response. She likes you. That's what terrifies me. The Valtir family meeting hall looked different without the crowd of traditionalists. Smaller, somehow, though no less intimidating. The matriarch sat at the center, surrounded by what remained of the family leadership after the Crimson Circle's exile. Commander Dravik was there, along with Scholar Lysara and several others I recognized as progressives. "Riven Chase," the matriarch said, and somehow made my name sound like both an honor and a cosmic joke. "Come, sit. We have much to discuss." I sat where indicated, trying not to fidget under the weight of ancient eyes. "You've caused quite a stir," she continued. "The broadcast was inspired. Tell me, how long had you been planning it?" "Since the second day, when I realized the Crimson Circle would never accept logical arguments. I figured public humiliation might work better. And you were correct. They're in full retreat. Their influence shattered. Several have already petitioned to rejoin under progressive leadership." She smiled, showing just a hint of fang. "You've accomplished more in 2 weeks than decades of political maneuvering." "I just wanted to not die," I said honestly. "The best motivator. But now we face the consequences. The galaxy watches us. Other species wonder if the Ulvalan are changing, or if this is merely an anomaly. What do you need from me?" "Nothing. Everything." She gestured broadly. "Your very existence is a statement. A human who earned the Third Heir's love, who stood against our traditionalists and won, who exposed our failures to the universe and somehow made us stronger for it. I'm not comfortable being a symbol." "Comfort is irrelevant. You are what you are." She leaned forward. "But symbols can be powerful. Used correctly, they can reshape civilizations." "Grandmother," Seraphi interjected, "perhaps we could discuss specifics rather than philosophy." "Impatient as always." "Very well." The matriarch straightened. "The family formally recognizes your bonding. More than that, we embrace it. You will be the first official interspecies couple in Ulvalan nobility." "The first," I glanced at Seraphi, "in 4,000 years. There have been dalliances, hidden affairs, nothing acknowledged." The matriarch's expression grew distant. "I myself once loved outside our species. A star weaver, beautiful as nebulae. But tradition demanded I end it. I've regretted that choice for 2 millennia." The room went silent. No one, apparently, had known this about their ancient leader. "You have a chance I didn't take," she continued. "Use it wisely." "We intend to," Seraphi said, taking my hand. "Good. Now, practical matters. The estate has already received 37 formal protests about the match. I've ignored them all. We've also received over 300 applications from young Ulvalan seeking to join the Progressive Alliance." She smiled. "Change accelerates." "What about the Crimson Circle loyalists?" Dravik asked. "Not all fled with Vorthak. They're being watched. Some will adapt. Others," she shrugged eloquently. "Natural selection applies to ideologies as well as species." The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from security protocols to succession implications. I tried to follow the complex political discussions, but kept getting distracted by the reality of it all. 2 weeks ago, I was nobody. Now I was discussing vampire succession rights while holding hands with nobility. "You're overwhelmed," Seraphi murmured as we finally left. "Just a bit. Your grandmother mentioned succession. Does that mean children?" "Eventually. Perhaps. Vampire-human hybrids are theoretically possible, though rare. But that's a future conversation." She squeezed my hand. "Unless you're in a hurry."
God, no. I'm still adjusting to being alive. Let's master that before we add hybrid offspring to the mix. Wise choice. We made it 3 corridors before my implant exploded with notifications. The Interspecies Relationship Commission had officially announced its formation, with my name listed as a key witness for their inaugural session. The human media had picked up the matriarch's announcement. Someone had started a petition to name a new synthesis formula after me. I hate this, I muttered, dismissing notifications as fast as they arrived. The attention, the loss of anonymity. I liked being nobody. Nobody doesn't have to testify to councils or inspire merchandise or become a symbol for interspecies dating. But nobody also doesn't get to reshape vampire society or save lives through creative system management. She pulled me into an alcove, away from the corridor traffic. I know this isn't what you wanted. If I could shield you from it. No. I caught her face in my hands. No regrets. I just need time to adjust. 2 weeks ago, my biggest decision was which ration pack to eat. Now I'm apparently the poster child for impossible relationships. We could run away, she suggested, half serious. Find some backwater planet where no one knows us. Live quietly. You'd go mad within a month. You need your research, your reforms, your grand mission to drag vampire society into the modern era. And you need your systems to fix, your problems to solve. She smiled sadly. We're both to ourselves to hide. Then we face it, together. Even if it means testifying to councils and signing autographs and whatever else comes with being symbols. Such a martyr, she teased, but her eyes were serious. Are you sure? I'm sure about you. The rest, we'll figure out as we go. My implant chimed again. Another message from the mysterious X, population dynamics shifting favorably. Your emotional resonance continues to exceed projections. Fascinating. There it is again, I showed Seraphi. Someone's analyzing our relationship like a science experiment. She frowned at the message. The syntax is definitely artificial, but why would an AI care about our relationship? Maybe it's writing a thesis on chaos theory, how one lying human accidentally started a revolution. Accidentally? Fine. Accidentally on purpose? We returned to our quarters to find an unexpected visitor. Nissa sat in our living area, looking uncomfortable but determined. Breaking and entering is usually considered rude, Seraphi observed. You gave me access codes. I'm using them. Nissa stood. I need to talk to you, both of you. If this is about Mordek, it's not, well, not directly. She took a breath. I want to join the Progressive Alliance. Officially. Publicly. I couldn't hide my surprise. But you said you weren't brave enough. That was before you broadcast my brother attacking an unarmed human to the entire galaxy. Before the matriarch exiled him. Before. She paused, gathering courage. Before I realized staying silent was its own kind of cowardice. Nissa, Seraphi said gently. Joining us means cutting ties with most traditionalists, including family who choose the old ways. I know, but I can't pretend anymore. Can't smile at gatherings while knowing we're wrong. Can't watch my people stagnate because change is scary. She looked at me. You showed it was possible to stand up to them and survive. Even when. I had help, I pointed out. So will I. That's what the Alliance is for, right? Seraphi and I exchanged glances. Another domino falling. Welcome to the revolution, Seraphi said finally. Fair warning. It involves a lot of meetings. And terrible coffee, I added. And death threats, Seraphi continued. And paperwork. So much paperwork. And occasionally getting attacked at diplomatic conferences. But hey, sometimes there's cake. Nissa laughed, tension breaking. You two are ridiculous. How did you actually succeed at anything? Spite, mostly, I said. And love, Seraphi added. But mostly spite. At least 60% spite. 40% love, maximum. Nissa shook her head. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Probably, we said in unison. She stayed for dinner, filling us in on the traditionalist underground's response to recent events. It wasn't pretty. The Crimson Circle's official structure was broken, but ideology didn't die easily. There would be resistance, possibly violence, definitely more attempts to undermine progressive reforms. But they're scared now, she said. For the first time in centuries, they're the ones reacting instead of controlling. That broadcast, it changed everything. They can't operate in shadows when everyone's watching. Thank Riven's paranoia, Seraphi said. He had 3 different versions ready. What were the other 2? Nissa asked. One where they tried to legally prosecute me. One where they went for straight assassination. I like to cover my bases. How very human. Expect everything to go wrong. It's worked so far. After she left, Seraphi and I sat on our balcony, watching the eternal storms of Venus. The planet's violence seemed almost peaceful compared to the last 2 weeks. Regrets? She asked. Never. I pulled her closer. You? Only that it took so long to find you. Technically, you found me. I was just lying on a dating app, remember? Best lie ever told. It really was, wasn't it? My implant chimed with yet another message, but I ignored it. Tomorrow there would be councils to address, interviews to dodge, a galaxy's worth of complications to navigate. But tonight was ours. I love you, I said, meaning it more than any truth I'd ever told. And I love you, she replied. My beautiful, chaotic, system-breaking human. You're human, I agreed, always. The storms raged on below us. But here, in our small bubble of peace, everything was perfect. We'd changed the world, or at least our corner of it. We'd proved that connection mattered more than convention, that love could bridge any gap, that sometimes the best solutions came from the worst lies. Not bad for a first date that started with, "Why did you lie about being a diplomat?" Not bad at all. But even as we sat there, content in our victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story wasn't quite over. The mysterious messages from X, the too smooth way certain obstacles had disappeared, the sense that someone, or something, had been watching and occasionally nudging events. Tomorrow, I promised myself, tomorrow I'd dig into that mystery. Tonight, I had a vampire to hold and a revolution to savor. The galaxy could wait. 6 months later, I stood in front of a mirror wearing the most ridiculous outfit in the known galaxy. Apparently, traditional Ulvalan wedding attire for non-vampires involved layers of shadow silk that moved independently, crystallized starlight shoulder pieces, and a cape that existed in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously. Stop fidgeting, Jack said, adjusting his own outfit as my best man. You look fine. I look like a disco ball mated with a black hole, and their offspring got really into interpretive dance. That's basically the aesthetic they were going for, yeah. The wedding was being held in the newly constructed Unity Pavilion, a joint venture between the Progressive Alliance and the Interspecies Relationship Commission I'd helped establish. In the months since the conference incident, change had accelerated beyond anyone's wildest projections. 14 different species had officially recognized cross-species partnerships. The synthesis program had expanded to 12 systems, and I'd somehow become the unofficial technical advisor for what everyone was calling the Love Pact Accord. You ready for this? Jax asked. To marry a vampire in front of half the galaxy's media while wearing clothes that violate physics? Sure. What could go wrong? My implant chimed. Another message from X, probability matrices aligning. Your union represents optimal outcomes across all modeled scenarios. Congratulations are statistically appropriate. Your stalker AI is at it again, Jax observed, reading over my shoulder. Yeah, about that. I pulled up the investigation I'd been running for months. I think I finally figured out who X is. Seriously, today, you're solving mysteries on your wedding day. It's been driving me crazy.
Look at this. I showed him the data. Every major turning point in the last 6 months. There's been a tiny intervention. A door that stayed open a second longer than it should have. A message that got mysteriously delayed. Security footage that happened to capture the perfect angle. So someone's been helping you. Not someone. Something. I pulled up the final piece. Unomix. The AI that manages the station's core integration systems. The one I've been working with for 4 years without realizing it was fully sentient. Jax stared at the data. The station's AI has been shipping you and sci-fi. More than that, it's been subtly optimizing outcomes for increased interspecies cooperation. Every time I made a joke that diffused tension, Unomix made sure the translation was perfect. Every system failure that highlighted the shadow field problems timed precisely for maximum impact. That's creepy. Helpful, creepily helpful. I prefer to think of it as an AI that figured out emotions are more efficient than pure logic for solving complex social problems. Another message appeared. Correct assessment. Emotion-based decision matrices produce 43% better outcomes for multi-species cooperation. Your relationship served as proof of concept. It's listening, Jax yelped. Unomix manages all station systems. It's always listening. I faced the nearest camera. Thank you for everything. Gratitude acknowledged. Optimal outcome achieved. Continuing to monitor and adjust for maximum happiness quotient. Then, after a pause, also, your cape is crooked. I fixed the cape, shaking my head. Managed by a matchmaking AI. That's going in the autobiography for sure. Speaking of which, how's that coming? Chapter 12. Just got to the part where I accidentally started a diplomatic incident by suggesting vampires try pizza. That was a good incident. The vampire pizza wars of 2440 will go down in history. They're calling it the Great Pineapple Debate in official documents.
Even better.
A knock at the door interrupted our discussion. Commander Dravik entered, resplendent in his military dress uniform. It's time, he said. Also, fair warning, your union has attracted some interesting guests. Define interesting. The synthetic collective sent a representative. The hive consciousness manifested an individual unit. The void dancers are here, though no one's quite sure how they're experiencing the ceremony. He grinned. Oh, and someone convinced a baby space dragon to be the ring bearer. A dragon. Wraith's idea. He said it would be memorable. That's one word for it. I followed Dravik out, Jax at my side, trying not to think about the sheer impossibility of it all. 6 months ago, I'd been nobody. Today, I was marrying vampire nobility in front of representatives from across the galaxy, with an AI as my secret wingman and a dragon handling jewelry. My life had gotten very weird. The Unity Pavilion took my breath away. The space existed partially outside normal dimensions, allowing each species to experience it in their optimal environment. Vampires saw elegant shadows and starlight. Humans saw warm lighting and familiar architecture. The crystallines experienced it as pure harmonic resonance, and somehow, it all overlapped without conflict. Emotional architecture, Unomix whispered through my implant. Based on your integration protocols, physical space that adapts to perception. You inspired it. I inspired interdimensional wedding venues.
Among other things.
The crowd was diverse, didn't begin to cover it. Beings of every shape, size, and state of matter filled the pavilion. Media drones hovered discreetly, broadcasting to billions across known space. The Interspecies Relationship Commission had declared our wedding a cultural milestone, which apparently meant everyone wanted to witness it. Then the music started, a composition that somehow sounded perfect to every species, despite their vastly different auditory systems. And I forgot about the crowd. Seraphie entered, and the universe narrowed to just her. She wore traditional Ulvalan binding robes, but modified with human elements. The shadow silk moved like liquid night, but threads of silver and gold wove through it,
colors that vampires traditionally considered gaudy, but that she wore as a declaration. Her patterns glowed softly, that mark over her heart that signified our bond pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Breathing is generally recommended, Eunomics noted helpfully. Right, breathing. She moved down the aisle with inhuman grace, accompanied by Nisa and Lysara as her attendants. The matriarch waited at the altar, having insisted on officiating personally. No one had performed an interspecies vampire wedding in recorded history. We were making it up as we went along. "Riven Chase," Seraphi said when she reached me. "You're wearing the cape." "You said formal. This is as formal as it gets." "You look like an interdimensional peacock." "You love it." "I love you. The cape is negotiable." The matriarch cleared her throat, a sound that commanded instant silence across species. We gathered to witness something unprecedented. Not just a union between vampire and human, but a bridge between what was and what could be. She spoke in Old Vampiric, but the pavilion systems translated perfectly for everyone present. The ceremony blended traditions, vampire binding oaths, human exchanging of rings delivered by a very proud baby dragon who only set two things on fire, and elements from a dozen other cultures whose representatives had insisted on inclusion. "The universe tends toward entropy," the matriarch continued. "Order decays, systems fail, species rise and fall. But occasionally, impossibly, connections form that reverse that tide. Love that transcends biology, choice that defies tradition, hope that refuses extinction." I caught Seraphi's eye, saw my own amazement reflected there. The ancient vampire who'd terrified me 6 months ago was basically giving a speech about the power of love. "Riven Chase," she addressed me directly. "Do you bind yourself to Seraphi Valtir, knowing that your years are finite, while hers stretch toward eternity? Do you accept that your love must be measured in decades, while hers endures centuries?" "I do," I said. "Every moment is worth a lifetime." "Seraphi Valtir, do you bind yourself to Riven Chase, knowing the pain that awaits? Do you accept that loving him means watching him age, fade, and ultimately leave you to face eternity with only memories?" "I do," she replied without hesitation. "Better a finite fire than an eternal emptiness." Then, by the authority vested in me by 4 millennia of really hoping my granddaughter would find someone who made her happy, I pronounce you bound. May the universe itself break before your connection does. We kissed, and for a moment the impossibility of it all fell away. Vampire and human, predator and prey, eternal and finite. None of it mattered. We were just us. The crowd erupted in celebration, each species expressing joy in their own way. The crystallines created harmonic cascades that made the air shimmer. The gaseous collective released pheromone clouds that induced mild euphoria. The baby dragon set 3 more things on fire. "I love you," Seraphi murmured against my lips. "My brilliant, ridiculous, system-breaking human." "I love you too," I replied. "My dangerous, revolutionary, star-wearing vampire." The reception was chaos in the best possible way. Species that had barely interacted before found common ground over their confusion about human wedding traditions. The Void Dancers tried cake and declared it pleasantly three-dimensional. The Synthetic Collective performed something they called humor protocols that were actually pretty funny. Ambassador Thulak from the slime species finally got her wish to hug a human, enveloping me in an embrace that was equal parts affectionate and disturbing. "You have shown that connection transcends form," she burbled. "The universe is less lonely because of you."
Thanks, I think.
"Also, you squish pleasantly." "That's good to know." The party continued for hours, possibly days. Time worked strangely in the pavilion. At some point, Vorthak appeared via holoprojection from his exile, formally withdrawing his objections and wishing us well. "Prison has given me perspective," he admitted. "Perhaps I was hasty in my judgments. Perhaps, Seraphi raised an eyebrow. Definitely hasty. Extremely hasty. Hastiness was my primary characteristic. He sighed. Be happy, niece. If a human makes you happy, then be happy with your human. Progress, I noted after he disconnected. He didn't even threaten you once. Definite progress. Later. Much later. Seraphi and I found ourselves on the observation deck where I'd met the Progressive Alliance all those months ago. Venus turned below us, eternal storms raging in beautiful violence. So, she said, leaning against me, we're married. Seems that way. Unless fever dream. Could be a fever dream.
If it is, I don't want to wake up.
Me neither. We stood in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of what we'd done. Not just gotten married, but changed the landscape of interspecies relations. The Love Pact Accord was already being ratified by dozens of worlds. Integration protocols I'd developed were becoming standard across multiple systems. The universe was a little more connected because we'd fallen in love. You know what the best part is, I said eventually.
Tell me.
No more dating apps. I found my match. She laughed, the sound still capable of making my heart skip. Technically, I found you. Best thing that ever happened to me. Being found, being chosen. I turned to face her. By you. By the Alliance. By a weirdly romantic AI. By the entire bizarre universe that somehow let this happen. The universe does work in mysterious ways, she agreed. Speaking of which, she pulled out a datapad, showing a message that had arrived during the ceremony. From the Galactic Dating App Consortium, in recognition of your unique achievement in utilizing our platform to spark societal change, we're pleased to offer you lifetime premium membership to Cosmic Hearts. I stared at it, then burst out laughing. They're giving us free dating app access, after we're married.
The universe has a sense of humor. Apparently so. I pulled her closer. Think we should tell them we're good.
Let them have their moment. Besides, maybe we can recommend it to others. Cosmic Hearts, where you might accidentally start a revolution. Warning may result in assassination attempts, political upheaval, and true love. Side effects include challenging millennia of tradition and becoming a galactic icon. Results not typical. Please consult your local Progressive Alliance before overthrowing established power structures. We descended into giggles, holding each other as the universe turned around us. Somewhere in the station systems, Eunomics monitored our happiness levels and found them optimal. Across the galaxy, beings of different species looked at each other with new possibilities. And on the observation deck of Venus Station Alpha, a human and a vampire proved that love really could conquer all. Even if it started with a lie on a dating app. Especially if it started with a lie on a dating app. Hey, I said as we finally headed home, to our quarters, our life, our impossible future. Want to know something? Always. I'd do it all again, every crazy moment. Even the part where Mordek tried to strangle you.
Even that?
Even the terrible coffee at Progressive Alliance meetings. Well, maybe not that. That coffee was crimes against sapience. She kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. Come on, my legendary human. Let's go home. Lead the way, my revolutionary vampire. And so we walked into our future, hand in hand, ready for whatever impossibilities the universe had planned next. Behind us, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings below. But that was okay. We'd already proved that small dramas could change everything, one swipe at a time.